right, so let's move on to the main course here. This is from the Blogger Tree blogspot. This was posted Sunday, February 28th, 2010. The Psychic Side of Things. And this is one of several individuals that has been involved in researching the case. When I first started looking into Amy's case, it was for a college term paper. I had never done a term paper and didn't have a clue as to what to write. I knew that whatever it was I wrote about had to be something that the instructor had never had a paper on before. The instructor had already mentioned that he wasn't in the mood for papers he had seen 1,000 times before, or the ones that some thought was a good idea of purchasing just to get a grade. He had made himself very clear to me as to what he expected. All I could think of was, what the hell is an overage college student like myself going to write about? The thought stuck in my mind for several weeks, clear up to the last 2 weeks of the quarter when the papers were due. The grade from the paper was a quarter of my final grade. I had to make it count. I remember thinking at the time that everyone I had talked to on a daily basis had mentioned or questioned, have they found who killed Amy yet? From that, I made a decision to write the paper on her case. It went as follows. October 27th, 1989, 10-year-old Amy Renee Mihaljevic was abducted from a Bay Village shopping center, a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. Reports claim Amy had gotten a phone call from a man. She was going to meet him at the shopping center to purchase a gift for her mother's promotion at work. Amy reportedly did meet a man, however, she was never seen alive again. On February 8, 1990, the decomposing body of Amy was found in Ashland County, Ohio. In a field close to the road, a jogger spotted her remains. The investigation has gone on for years. Still, no one has been apprehended in her murder. After thousands of leads, it seemed to come down to an impossibility that anyone would ever be charged in the hideous murder of 10-year-old Amy. To me, it just couldn't stop there. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened late in October '89 to a brown-eyed, blondish-haired child who mistakenly trusted adults. Many people gave me information on Amy. Some were right, some were wrong, but they all were willing to catch a murderer. I decided to track the unknown. Going on speculation and newspaper articles, this case took me from Monticello, Iowa, to New Jersey, back to Little Rock, Arkansas, and then to Pennsylvania and back to Ohio. This is what I found. Let's assume that this was a crime of the occult class people. The pieces would fit like this. Newspaper articles reported that Amy and this man were getting a gift for Amy's mother for her promotion at work. Keywords here are gift, mother, promotion, work. Unmistakably, all these things happened. While watching TV one night, Unsolved Mysteries had a woman who was a police psychic working on a case in Monticello, Iowa. The case was an old homicide. She did, however, solve the case after many years. I took down the police chief's name, the city and state, thinking maybe she could tell me something. I'm still pretty unbelieving in this type of thing. I called Monticello, Iowa anyway, and spoke with Police Chief Walters. I was expecting to hear the person on the other end of the line say that was just a made-up story for TV viewing. Chief Walters proved me wrong. He told me he couldn't give me a number for Dorothy Allison. He did, however, tell me to contact her chief, which was Robert DeLita in Nutley, New Jersey. He was very helpful and gave me DeLita's number. I called DeLita and explained to him that I was interested in getting the number of Dorothy Allison so I could ask her about a case here. It was a little girl that I never knew, yet wanted the person or persons brought to justice. Chief DeLita told me he didn't give out her number. It was unlisted. Then all of a sudden he said, "I'll make an exception to the rule this time." I was shocked because there are so many people wanting to talk with her. Chief DeLita gave me 2 numbers and then said, "Tell her I told you to call." I done exactly that. She needed specific information like the time and place of birth, time the 911 call came in, when the body was found, and the county and state she was born in. It had to be written down and sent to her with my return address written in red so she could distinguish it from other items in the mail. Then I was put on a waiting list. Dorothy told me she was working on a few other cases and she went by the age of the child. These cases were extra beside her regular job with the Nutley Police Department. So apparently, this psychic is employed on some kind of permanent basis with the Nutley Police Department. Interesting. I sent what information I had, however, I didn't have her time of birth. I did have everything else. I called Lieutenant Tompkins in Bay Village to see if he would tell me where Amy was born. He did, and in conversation I asked him if he had ever heard of Dorothy Allison. Again, I was shocked when he said yes, Amy's grandmother had called her in on the case. It isn't standard practice for my department, but any information would help. I asked him if he would do another composite if I got more information other than what they had. Tompkins didn't want to do that because the people in that area were still very afraid and he didn't wish to frighten them anymore. Wait, isn't that kind of weird? Let's say there was more accurate information about a perpetrator. He doesn't want to solve the case because he doesn't want to frighten people. That sounds really weird. Wow, okay, moving on here. So I thought let's go another direction. What is all this stuff about occult and sacrifice? What am I really dealing with here? Next stop, the library. If Dorothy Allison was a for real person, let's check out a few haunted Ohio books and see what they say. These books seem to be off the wall to me. However, in the back, they listed some people, psychics, and their numbers. In Pennsylvania, they had a listing for Carol Kirkpatrick, with a K, K-A-R-Y-L. I called Carol that morning. She sounded very nice, and she told me many things about the case. Carol said it was an occult thing. It was done on the biggest celebration of the year, Halloween. That part fit the puzzle. It was the time frame. She said it had something to do with the girl's mother. The connection was Amy's mother's brother. Amy was close to him or a cousin that lived near Amy on her mother's side. Carol said Amy trusted him. He was thin, fair-skinned, brown eyes, 5'10", wide-apart eyes, thin nose, and a goat-like chin, whatever that means. Carol said the man was like family. This occult group was a very tight group in Ashland County. The building used for their meetings was a two-tone gray structure, and there is a legitimate business in the front, but it was just a cover. Carol asked if I knew whether or not Amy's mother burnt candles. Well, she did. Every night till Amy was found, a candle was lit in the window. All of a sudden, she asked, "Who is Dana?" I told her I had no idea. Carol told me to get an artist to do another composite. Do you know Steve Hale in Columbus at BCI? I didn't. She told me to call him anyway and asked him to do another composite. I thanked her for her time. Then she told that the man that did this to Amy had a B-sounding name, like Butch. The other man in the composite was Puerto Rican, and his name was Daryl, and an attorney was involved. Okay, interesting. So this psychic, now we just went over information that was not made public until later, years later, but here we have a psychic saying there were 3 men involved. Very curious. She says one of them was Puerto Rican, according to the DNA from the 3 hairs, though. And again, let's not fall for black and white fallacies. Of the 3 hairs, it's possible one or two might not have been related to the crime. And yet, it's also possible other individuals were involved in the crime, and none of their hair or DNA evidence appeared anywhere near Amy. Or at least none that was recovered. So again, let's not fall for any of these fallacies. Okay, so she's also stating an attorney is involved. Okay, when I hung up, the first thing that came to mind was she is not real. The next day, I called Steve Hale at BCI in Columbus and explained what I was doing and asked if he had ever heard of Carol. Yes, he had. I asked, is she for real? Steve said, very much so. I've worked with her several times. He said she's not 100% all the time, but she's very good at what she does. Steve went on to explain he could only do the composite if Lieutenant Tompkins told him to. Well, that's not going to happen. Again, it's time to go in another direction, keeping in mind that all this must somehow fit together. I drove back to where the body was found and spoke with area residents. So this is an individual researcher who's not afraid to go to hit the ground running and just start interviewing these people. At first, they were a little hesitant about saying much. After a few minutes, they opened up. I was told that Amy's mother was in the area 2 summers before Amy went missing. She was with a man named Bud and his wife. So again, this psychic said a B-sounding name like Butch. Is Bud similar enough to Butch? I don't know. According to the statement, this guy, Bud, and Amy's mother were old friends from Hinckley, Ohio. They were at this house because Bud knew that the couple was buying it from someone else, sort of like they were checking it out for them. The woman that sold the house befriended the woman that moved in. The new owner's wife became very sick, and on her deathbed told over and over the day she died, quote, "They're going to find that Bud's boys killed little Amy," end quote. So apparently, on her deathbed, the day she died, she was repeating that all day, not just once. This is what is stated here. She said she knew for a fact. 3 hours later, she died. The person she told this to was the former owner of the house. There's another possible piece of the puzzle if you're into B-sounding names, the letter B. That's curious. That must have been kind of spooky, unless this person is lying about everything. If they're legitimate, that must be kind of spooking after talking to a psychic and then finding all of this out just from interviewing locals. That's weird. Back at the library, I found one most interesting book. This one tells of Halloween, sacrifice, and blood. It tells the body has to be found. It was. And that it must be burnt. After I picked up a copy of the death certificate, I again was shocked. Amy's remains were cremated. About 6 to 9 months after Amy was found, her mother got a new job with the state attorney general's office. Now that's some promotion. The deathbed statement was never told to any police official, the woman told me. I decided they never asked, and they probably won't believe me anyway. So this is the woman who heard the deathbed confession. This is what she stated. I keep remembering back, and in comparison to the reaction of Susan Smith to Amy's mother, they somehow seemed the same at times. All the key words, clear back to the first newspaper articles, are in this child's history. I turned in my paper and received a grade of good and passed the class. That instructor was a retired cop. I'll always remember him telling the class the day of when he met his partner, when he first went on the force. Does the name Serpico sound familiar? Do I believe everything that these psychics said? No. Do I think Margaret was into the occult? No. Do I believe Amy was a sacrifice? No. Do I believe the killer is from the Ruggles area? Most definitely. Do I believe the deathbed statement? Could be. Anyone wanting to talk about their psychic experience in regards to Amy's case, post here. Refer back to James' site for his experiences. Let's compare notes. Okay. So, someone commented here, what do you mean by deathbed statement? I saw Margaret Mihaljevic many times before and after Amy's death. She and Amy were very close. Margaret was absolutely devastated by Amy's disappearance and murder. Trust me, she was no Susan Smith. Margaret had her troubles, but she was a good person and a doting mama. After Amy's death, she became a victim's advocate, and that accounted for her change in careers. As I'm sure you know, it didn't last long, and she eventually became a newspaper delivery person, which is quite a step backwards. Another response here, what if the psychic were right? What if when she said it was on her mother's side, like brother or cousin, it could have meant that because Amy knew of the possibility of a divorce, she transferred her mother-daughter instinct to Ruth. Remember, Ruth was the one at the time Amy went missing, was teaching Amy how to cook and even cut her hair. That would mean the psychic was talking about Ruth's brother or cousin. So then tell me, who is the guy that looks a lot like Ruth in this picture, and where do these people come from? Better yet, where did the guy go to, and was his name Daryl? That's curious. So again, those hallucinating that all psychics are wrong 100% of the time. Let's say the psychics can tap into something yet unknown to science, but maybe in another 100 years it'll all be science and everybody will know how they do it. But, obviously today's magic is tomorrow's science. But let's say there's something to it. If they're getting a vibe or something, that vibe, what is the accuracy of that vibe? It's like if you have a dream about something, it turns out to be true, but how often is the dream 100% literal or true? And again, it could be a coincidence, but regardless of whether it's a coincidence or not, why would psychics be able to receive 100% perfect transmissions about anything? That's obviously not how it would work, even if it were true. Obviously, I'm not alleging that the psychics are real, but if they were real, why? Obviously, it doesn't seem to make any kind of sense that they'd be able to receive 100% concrete messages. I mean, who can do that with anything? It's just weird. I mean, does any career have 100% accuracy of anything? I mean, it's just really weird. Another response here: if the deathbed statement was not made known to the police, then I am assuming that Bud, close to Butch, was never questioned or investigated. Whatever happened to him? He wasn't a relative, but if he and Margaret were such close friends from their youth, he might have seemed like a relative to Amy. As far as deathbed statements are concerned, I know a relative who was on her deathbed told another relative a family secret. The latter thought she was delirious. I happen to know it was true. And of course, yeah, that's with a lot of things, depending on the nature of the deathbed statement, depending on who's giving the deathbed statement and what their state of mind is. Obviously, it could be true or untrue. I mean, it's kind of anecdotal either way, but to hallucinate it's definitely not true or definitely true, that's obviously quite silly. We don't do that on Mindshock. Another response here: I want to clarify my previous post. I'm not saying Bud committed the crime. Did he have children? If the new owner made that statement, it seems like Bud might have known that too. He might have told her and she kept it hidden all those years. Was Bud related to the Matlocks or someone in law enforcement? Uh-oh, now we have an anonymous comment here. To all, Bud is the nickname for Al and Doyle Matlock's uncle, who lived in the house as far as I know. Now, does that change the story? I don't believe he was questioned. He moved. From what I can find on him, he lives somewhere on the lake in Lorraine. I don't know why certain people were told not to talk by the FBI. I was thinking, So apparently the FBI told Pat Stokes not to talk about anything. We'll get into Pat Stokes and other issues here, but let me just finish the responses. Someone else asked, did you find a Margaret and Bud connection in Hinckley? I thought Margaret was from Wisconsin. Then when she married Mark, they moved to Arkansas. Then they came to Ohio. Another post here: I don't have a clue as to why Margaret would know Bud. Maybe she worked the same place he did at one time. Maybe she worked in a restaurant. He came in a lot. Again, I don't know. Wish I did. As to Margaret's mother, I don't know if she's still living. When I spoke to Dale, Margaret's brother, a while back, she wasn't in good health. Mark and Margaret both were from Wisconsin. Maybe it was his idea to say Margaret was getting a promotion from work, that he at some point did work with her, and told the guy that called her to use that as a ruse to get Amy. Unless he was the guy that took Amy, just a thought. In another conversation with the same psychic, she said that Margaret didn't realize this person was dangerous. Somehow or other, this person is from Margaret's past. I believe this to be a true statement because when I talked to Dale, he had told me that the FBI was looking back a year into Margaret's life for a boyfriend. Dale said he thought they didn't know what they were doing because Margaret didn't have a boyfriend. Dale said that Margaret was going out dancing as she loved to dance, and the guy the FBI were referring to was him. I don't think so. Another post: I think it is interesting that many people from the New London area kept saying they knew Margaret, that she visited the area, or that she and Bud knew each other. Two thoughts kept crossing my mind. One, what are the odds of Amy's body being dumped near or next to the house of someone Margaret knows? Two, on the other hand, if you know Margaret, why dump the body so close to your own home or a relative's home to aid the police in a possible connection? Now, my response there, I don't know if I mentioned this in previous podcasts or not. If there were multiple individuals involved and there was a falling out between one or two or more of them, and one of them wanted to frame the others, if she was kept in a freezer or somewhere else and they wanted to get back at one of them, and again, maybe these aren't that smart criminals, they wanted to dump it next to one of their houses, even if they had a possible connection to Margaret. I don't know. I don't know. Another post here, the only people that Margaret knew was in that area was Pat and Joanne. Pat won't talk about it anymore, and Joanne died, so you can't ask her anything. Joanne was the one that said Bud's boy done it, referring to the man living in the log house. Pat remembers seeing Margaret at Joanne's house years before Amy was killed. Seems it wasn't known that Margaret knew these people. There are 3 different sets of people who claim the people in the log house done it that don't know each other. Anne, a resident of New London, Joanne of Ruggles, who's died, Bill Hayes by Nova. There have been many people comment that the people in the log house were the ones that killed Amy. I mean, that is curious that there's so many different groups of people with the same rumor. Now, that doesn't mean the rumor is true, but it's curious that there's multiple points of reference here. It's not just one person claiming this. Someone else asked, who said Margaret and Bud were old friends from Hinckley? Then 2 people have placed Margaret in the New London area, and at least one of these people have placed her there with Bud, whose cabin Amy was found relatively close to, correct? I still find it interesting Amy was found near the home of someone a person claimed Margaret knew, not saying Bud did it. Margaret, at the time Amy was kidnapped, was at the Trading Times. Is that correct? Where was that located? A couple other posts here. Pat Stokes said that Joanne had told her this was before Joanne got sick. That's exactly why the FBI is out there looking for Al Matlock. Yes, you're correct. Yes, Margaret worked at Trading Times. The question I have, was she working at the desk all the time, or was she on the road? I really don't know where the main office for the Trading Times was located. I'm assuming that it has to be close to Bay in one of the burbs. I think the Trading Times was located in Westlake. I doubt Margaret's job required traveling, as it would have been walk-ins for fax, phone-in type of things. Okay. Another post here, most of the time, the people from Trading Times would go to the place and take pictures every few days. I know one person that did meet one of these people that had done this. I think you're right about being in Westlake. That is curious, though. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean Margaret was the one who went out and took pictures, but wow, that would put them in contact with a certain number of individuals at various homes. People asking about Ruth, the babysitter. No word on Ruth yet. Isn't that odd? Is she hiding now that James has uncovered her? Surely you would think people from Bay would want help in disclosing what they know about her. What was her job? Where did she live? We know James was told by Ruth that she was a friend of Margaret's. If that were true, why hasn't she come forward just to answer these few questions? I don't believe Ruth had anything to do with what happened to Amy, so why the secrecy? Another post here, I've been thinking, how did the person that contacted Amy get her not to tell who he was? Assuming what Amy told her friends was correct, a present for her mom, if the person was already known to her, then when she told her friends about getting the present, why not say his name? And if the person was unknown to her, but somehow befriended her, why not say the name he gave her? Obviously not his real name, most likely. I mean, that is curious as well, unless she did say his name to her friends. Someone responded here, he probably didn't tell her his name. I think she told her friends that she was meeting a friend she hadn't met yet. If she already knew him, she probably would have recognized his voice and volunteered his name. When she saw him, she may have recognized him from somewhere because he was probably watching her for some time. She might have felt it was all right to leave with him because he seemed familiar. If Amy was really seen in the New London area the day after her abduction, I wonder how she was threatened to keep her from running away. Another response here, I think that Amy may have been drugged. She probably was scared to death and didn't know which way to run, or maybe thought he might hit or catch her if she did run. It's really hard to tell. The man that thought he saw her was certain. When he heard of her death, he cried because he tried to tell New London police and they wouldn't listen to him. And I've talked about that guy before in the previous episodes. Supposedly he was the town drunk or something, but again, whether he was or he wasn't, if Amy was at a certain place and he happened to see her, I mean, what does that mean? Someone else posted this. I remember it was a year after Amy was found when Mr. Sabo took his life. Does anyone have a date? And we'll be getting into that as well, but I just want to go back to the basics, which, again, is a titled post from this blog, Amy Mihaljevic, The Blogger Tree, a continued discussion on the Amy Mihaljevic case after 20 years. This is posted March 24th, 2012. Back to the basics. I know it's been keep in mind, 2012. I know it's been some time since anyone heard a word on Amy's case, so I thought I'd go back to the beginning and see just what might have slipped through our radar. 1. Spatzel said, quote, "We found a yellow gold fiber at the recovery site, possibly from a 79 Ford or a camper," end quote. This is in James' book, page 239. 2. I know the FBI had questioned Al Matlock earlier in the case and continue to show interest in this person after all these years. Why is that? 3. Ashland County has an interest in Al Matlock also. According to Roger Martin, they have a warrant on him. Martin claimed Al Matlock was in West Virginia. 4. Doyle Matlock and Al Matlock did have a cousin that lived on the corner of County Road 1181 and 126. Another curiosity there. 5. Doyle said to the Greenwich Police Chief Verberg that his uncle lived near the intersection where Amy was found. The 1181-126 intersection. He also said his cousin lives in Kentucky. This is, again, James Renner's book, page 127. 6. Doyle was very evasive about his family connections. Doyle grew up with his grandparents. His mother lives in Cleveland. Doyle lived near where Amy was from, Amherst, a suburb near Bay. Doyle moved not far away from where the body was found. Renner's book, page 194. 7. Doyle also said he heard it on a scanner when they found her and went to his cousin's house to tell them the road would be blocked by the cops soon. He knows how cops work. Renner wondered why Doyle would be listening to the scanner at 7:30 in the morning. Now, that's a curious question. Obviously, if he was one of the ones who dumped the body, he would want to know when it was found. On the other hand, if these are criminals involved in other criminal activities, they might want to know when cops are in the area. So, yeah, it's really tough with these criminals on trying to decipher what is or isn't linked specifically to Amy's case. 8. In 2005, Doyle was approximately 40 years old. At that time, he lived in Polk, Ohio. His sometimes girlfriend, Lori Ann French Wright, lived in nearby Greenwich. Wright was apparently leaving Doyle for good. A domestic squabble ensued. Doyle stabbed Wright more than 20 times in the head, chest, and right arm. He attacked her with such force the knife blade broke off in her skull. 9. Doyle pled guilty to the charges and for exchange to 20 to life in prison. No one from Doyle's family was there when he was sentenced. 10. Pat Stokes claimed she met Margaret at Joanne Stillion's a year prior to Amy going missing. Years later, Joanne told Pat that when they find out who done it, it would be Bud's boy, Doyle's cousin, on 126. 11. Bill Hayes, found in James's book, page 181 to 182, called James on the phone after he read the request for information about Amy, which James had placed in the Ashland newspaper. That conversation is a must-read. It does connect Al Matlock to the cabin and much, much more. Were all 3 cousins involved? And I'll be referencing James Renner's book in a moment. We'll go over all of that. 12. That log house comes up again in conversation of Ann on Crime Rant. People in the know. 13. A rumor going around that area stated that the FBI told the parents of their dead daughter that the same 3 men killed her that killed Amy. They just couldn't prove it. I'm not sure which case they're referencing here. This is just a rumored case. Of course, a lot of FBI agents in Bay Village as well. 14. Al Matlock was known to kidnap girls. 1 fell out of his van and crawled across US 250 to the Norwalk Hospital. Bill Hayes later found out it was his van that Matlock used without his knowledge. Now, again, I'm not insinuating that Bill Hayes is involved in any way, but if he is and he wants to deflect attention from himself, is that what he would say? 15. Doyle told all his friends he killed Amy. That's a curiosity. Then again, when we're dealing with psychotic criminals who want to get clout and make up stories, Obviously, that's one they would make up even if they were innocent. But of course, or they could be guilty and be bragging about it because, again, they're crazy psychos. So it's kind of hard to tell what that means exactly. 16, someone gave information to the FBI connecting Amy's family to Al Matlock 2.5 years ago. So that would have been 2009-ish. All these things have been talked about before. Have we missed anything? What is your opinion? So some posts here. I don't know what to think. James and other researchers continue to be worlds apart on the identity of the suspect. Another researcher posted here, I wouldn't say worlds apart. We have both the same people in mind. We just differ in feelings of who the most likely candidate is. Here's the thing. I have come to the conclusion that there are 3 groups with 3 people in each group. No, I will not give the names, however, most people already know who these people are. I also believe that there could be a lone person, in which case I have 2 other people in mind, one known, the other unknown to the world. The one group of 3 is without a doubt the most striking in my opinion, just as Runkle is in James's. So according to these researchers, there's 3 groups of suspects, each with 3 people. So, and one of those 3 groups are responsible. There's also 2 individuals that could be responsible. So there's 5 possibilities according to these researchers. 3 groups of 3 or 2 individuals working alone. That seems to be what this has boiled down to over many hours and years of research online. Hard to dispute that. And it's a very fair assessment. They're not really stating which one is definitively guilty. They have their most likely candidate group, but they can't necessarily exclude the other 2 groups or 2 individuals working alone. Another post here, Doyle's in prison, so they have his DNA. Have the Bay Village Police Department examine it. And it is curious, because I don't believe they stated specifically who they have and haven't tested. Another response here, I can't say that they have because I really don't know. I don't even know if the BVPD would even say one way or another if they did or not. I would have thought they had, but maybe not. James might have an idea because he was once there to ask Doyle questions. Regarding Al Matlock, an anonymous poster posted this. Alvin Matlock is the best suspect of any I've read about. My money is on Al Matlock being involved in Amy's abduction and homicide. A response here, I'm sure he fits the puzzle somehow. With so many things pointing in his direction, he would almost have to. Not saying he was the abductor or killer. The role he played remains to be seen. Time will tell. And that's curious, too, with these groups of criminals that are known to each other. These criminals might know what other criminals are doing. So even if they weren't necessarily directly involved, they might know who it was. They might know possibly what has happened. Another great post on the Blogger Tree blogspot here, February 20th, 2010, calling all scenarios. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go over James Renner's info first, and then we'll go back to all these scenarios. So, I'm going to read from James Renner's book here, Amy, My Search for Her Killer, The Secrets and Suspects in the Unsolved Murder of Amy Mihaljevic. This is one of the best sources of information on the case. I'm going to go to Chapter 28, New Job, New Lead. My old editor thought of me when a staff writer position opened up at the Free Times end of October. Even though I still felt exhausted every time I thought about the scene, I took the gig. Mostly I did so because I wanted to tell a couple of stories that the scene had rejected. The one about the old man from Mansfield who found a robot while cleaning out his father's basement, perhaps. Or the one about the prosecutor from Cleveland who disappeared in Pennsylvania under mysterious circumstances. I thought it would be nice to work with Frank again. Frank and the other editors liked the missing prosecutor story. I was sent out to report on it. It was a long drive down I-76 into Pennsylvania in search of District Attorney Ray Greikar, who once prosecuted a truck stop serial killer investigated by Ashland County Detective Roger Martin. But I had a lot to occupy my mind. I had recently received a phone call from a woman named Amy P. She asked that I not use her full name. If Amy Mihaljevic had not been abducted that day in 1989, she would have gone to this girl's house for a sleepover. Amy P. was angry mainly because I dragged Margaret's drinking problem into the article. It didn't matter that the Plain Dealer reported in 2001 that Margaret had died from alcoholism. You shouldn't have talked about it, she said. It didn't have anything to do with it. You should have just talked about Amy. I told her when it came to tracking down Amy's killer, I didn't really care if I upset a few people. I told her if all the information was spread out on the table instead of locked in some closet, maybe the solution would present itself. I may not be the person who solved this case, but if I wrote everything I discovered, perhaps it would make enough sense to the individual who's holding the missing piece of the puzzle. What can you tell me about Amy? I asked. She was a very intelligent girl, Amy P. said. I don't know she would have gone with anybody she didn't know. Were you there at Baskin-Robbins with Amy? I asked. No, she said. I had the sense she was hedging her answers somehow. First of all, who exactly was she? She was in the Bay Village yearbook, sure, but why had I not heard her name from Amy's other friends? Did you know Christy Sabo or Kristen Bayless? I asked. I played baseball with Bayless. Yeah, I knew Sabo. Heard she was a stripper right after high school. At least Christy Sabo never hedged her answers when she talked with me. She had more reason to distrust reporters than this woman did, and she was always open and honest. I was done beating around the bush. You weren't in the plaza that day, I asked. You sure about that? I wasn't. Now ask her to give you a name and she'll do it just to get you off her back. The swarmy voice that lives inside all writers said to me, she's scared. It couldn't be more obvious. Give it a try. You told me Amy was going to a sleepover at your house that night, I said, but you weren't walking with Amy to the plaza after school. You weren't just going to spend the day with her. No, she was going to come over later. But you also said you didn't know about this meeting she had with this man that picked her up. She told Kristen Bayless about it, but not you. She never said 2 words to me about it. That doesn't make any sense. What did she tell you she was doing then? I don't. Who was at the plaza that day if you weren't? Who was with Amy? Without even a pause, without an ounce of hesitation, she dropped the name I had searched all of Bay Village for, the witness to Amy's abduction. Just past the Pennsylvania border, my cell phone rang again, rousing me from a daydream of revenge. The caller had a 419 prefix. That meant it was coming from Ashland. It was a man named Bill Hayes. He lived in Ashland County, and he'd kept my newspaper article from the Times-Gazette with him for a week before he summoned the nerve to call. I knew a gentleman of a shady character, he began. Though I wasn't the greatest person myself, in my own little cheap way, I was hurting people too. I never had anything to do with physically harming anyone, but I was into the drugs and booze and all that for a while. I guess I'm one of the misfits of Ashland County. Look, when all that went down with the girl being found out there, my wife, she wasn't my wife then, though, I cried to my wife, I knew this guy, name of Al Matlock. Friend of mine. This Al was picked up and questioned by the cops. When they found that girl's body, Al was at the log cabin a couple 100 yards away. His cousin lived there at the time. We got pot in that cabin from Al's cousin one time. If you watch the news footage from that day, they were shooting the field from a helicopter. You can see Al's white Ford Pinto parked at the cabin. Anyway, a couple weeks after they found the body, me and Al, were out on a drunk. We went out, got some beer or something like that. I was in the passenger seat of that Ford Pinto. After a while, I noticed we were stopped. He said, "This looks like a good place to smoke a joint." So we started smoking, and then Al says, "That's where they found that little expletive. That's where they found that little expletive, that little expletive." Well, I started to sober up real quick when he says that, and that's when I noticed he has us parked next to the place where they found her body. I said, What the expletive are we doing here? They're watching this spot. Get me the expletive out of here now. We'll go to jail if we sit here. Al, she's dead and forgotten about, he says. From that day on, it's bothered me. Why would he even talk about her like that? Good question, I thought. Did Al have any connections to Cleveland? Well, one time we got together and he and his friends, Dave and Sandy, had some really good pot. Where, I asked him. Cleveland, he said. It was in Westlake, though. Sandy was a really pretty woman. She offered me a drink and this and that. Meanwhile, Al and Dave, them two, were off by themselves. They were whispering. Don't worry about it, I heard Dave say to Al. Nobody's going to know nothing. I think all this happened over about 2 months, and it's been 15 years now since I had a drink. Is there anything else you can tell me about Al Matlock? I asked. He thought for a moment. His aunt, the one he was living with out there, she made the best sausage and biscuits, but she made it out of squirrel. It was absolutely delicious. Man, it was the sweetest meat. I made a pig of myself. About Al and his business with the body, I said. I was told the cops found his coat by the body, Hayes said, 50 or 100 feet away. His name or initials were sewn into the coat. Of course, that could be a misunderstanding. After all, AM stands for both Al Matlock and Amy Mihaljevic. The symmetry gave me goosebumps, though. I knew in my heart all these years that Al was involved, he said. I was beginning to believe him. So here's another curiosity, though. If someone is trying to frame Al Matlock, would they not leave a jacket with his initials somewhere near the body? And how can it not be clearly stated whether it was or wasn't her jacket? I mean, there's a lot of problems here. Chapter 29, The Cavalry. Al Matlock was nowhere to be found. I was also having trouble finding an address or phone number for the woman who, according to Amy P., was a witness to Amy's abduction, a young woman I'll refer to as Maddie. So I called in the cavalry. Without a doubt, the smartest thing I did as a reporter was write an article about a private eye named Mike Lewis. Lewis ran an outfit called Confidential Investigative Services and was kind enough to tell me stories of cheating spouses for a special Scene Valentine's Day news piece. The article generated a certain amount of business and made Lewis happy. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you, he said. I need help finding a few people, I told Lewis, and I reached him by phone in November. When I started to tell him about Amy's case, he stopped me short. Can you meet me at the Bob Evans in Willoughby tomorrow night, he asked. I'll bring my partner along and you can tell us both about it. Meeting a pair of private investigators in some public place really puts a different spin on the whole restaurant experience. For one thing, how often does this happen? How many of these couples we sit next to at a Longhorn Steakhouse or Applebee's, how many of these couples are actually a detective and his client, some spouse worried about a cheating husband? Secondly, there's this game Lewis and his partner like to play. Looky there, Lewis said. He's a big man with muscles pushing out of his shirt under a thick neck. He was smiling, though, looking at a table behind me. As he said this, Lewis nudged his partner, a young man, probably not yet 30, with short dark hair, and not enough stubble at 5 in the evening to require a shaving. I followed their gaze to a middle-aged man sitting across from a middle-aged woman. Lewis's protege nodded. Uh-huh, he said. What? I said. They're having an affair, Lewis said. I looked at them again. To me, they appeared to be just another couple out for a cheap meal. How can you tell? Lewis shrugged. It becomes second nature, he said. It's in their body language. The way she touches his hand whenever it gets close to hers, the way he looks at her and then around at the restaurant. Married couples don't work like that. God, that depressed me. I looked around the room at all the secret perverts on secret dates. That stuff will make a person paranoid. Tell us about Amy, Lewis said. And so I did. By the time I was done, they had learned all the major plot points, and I had learned the younger man's name was Dan Washington. We want to help you in any way we can, Washington said. Lewis nodded. No charge. You can just call us consultants or something. I told him that sounded fine. I said I'd throw in the Bob Evans as a bonus. Lewis asked me what I needed, and I handed them a short list of names. Al Matlock was on there. Maddie's real name was there too, along with Sam Tillerman and a number of Amy's childhood friends I couldn't track down. Can you find these people for me, I said, and can you tell me if the men on that list have criminal records? Get it to you by tomorrow afternoon, said Lewis. Email fine? Email's great, I said. I noticed email was suddenly distracted by another couple just ordering food. He looked at Dan and smiled. Lewis will never want for business. Sure enough, the emails arrived the next morning. Maddie's profile contained her address and phone number as well as those of her neighbors, going back 10 years. Her height and weight were included too, taken no doubt from reports to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Amy's friends, Renee Moran, Elizabeth Jeffers, Cindy Meeks, were located too. I want you to notice that all these women are still unmarried, Lewis wrote in one email. That's pretty unusual. That says to me this incident was pretty traumatic to anyone that was close to Amy. So just watch how you approach them. Sam Tillerman's background was clean. Al Matlock's was more interesting. He's not very integrated with society, Lewis wrote, so it will take a little bit of detective work to find him. I didn't even find a date of birth on this guy. What he did find was a number of addresses and post office boxes listed under Matlock's real name, Alvin, in Indiana, Florida, Kentucky, and several hamlets in northeast Ohio. Alvin's Matlock's most current address was somewhere in Savannah, Ohio, a short drive from County Road 1181. It also appeared he had a close relative named Wayne Doyle Matlock, a brother perhaps, or cousin. Not long after I learned of Matlock's nomadic wanderings, I got another tip from Ashland County. "Are you looking into the Amy Mihaljevic case?" asked a man named Don Parsons, who'd also seen the article in the Times-Gazette. "I am." "Well, did anyone tell you about the videotape yet?" "What videotape?" "The one that shows Amy." "Are you saying you've seen a video of Amy Mihaljevic?" "Not me," he said, "but I know people who did. If you'd come out here, I'll give you all the proof you need." "I wouldn't trust this guy," Lewis said when I told him about the phone call. "Where did he want to meet?" "At a farmhouse out on State Route 60. "No, might be an ambush for all we know. This guy could be Matlock himself. If you're going out there, we're going with you." "You wouldn't mind taking a few hours out of your day?" I said. "No," Lewis said. "Sounds fun." Even though I wasn't a week into my job at the Free Times, Frank let me take off for the afternoon to search for evidence of Amy's murder in the Ohio backcountry. My adrenaline was already amping up. I drove out to meet Lewis and Dan at a suburban Applebee's. I left my car behind and climbed into Lewis's Lincoln Town car. It smelled like a vehicle that was lived in. Not bad, but musty. Most of their job consists of late-night stakeouts. With the windows tinted as strongly as they were, it's likely they could go unnoticed for as long as they wanted. "Ready?" Lewis said. Beside him, Dan looked as excited as I felt. It seemed like a bad omen to me. No way could it be this easy. No way were we driving out to take down Amy's killer today. "Yeah," I said, "but I don't carry any weapons, not even a pocket knife." "Dan, you packing?" Lewis asked. "No," he said. "That's all right," Lewis said. "I am. Let's go." Don Parsons lived in a trailer set up on blocks behind a farmhouse in New London, Ohio. When Lewis pulled the town car into the driveway an hour later, Parsons was outside waiting. He was a short fella, rugged looking, like a guy who has worked outdoors his entire life, shaping the land. On his head was a tan army cap. Two other men stood on either side of him. They were older than Parsons and taller, dressed in jeans and long-sleeved flannel shirts. Their lanky bodies framed the smaller fella nicely. They appeared to be identical twins. "Looks like they were hoping for a little 3-on-1 action," Lewis said. Then to Dan, "Keep your eyes open." We got out of the vehicle. Parsons approached Lewis with his hand out in greeting. "James, I'm Don Parsons." Lewis shook his hand and told him he had the wrong guy. I introduced myself, and then Parsons introduced Terry and Jerry. Apparently we both had bodyguards that day. Parsons led everyone to a semicircle of plastic chairs and wooden rockers. There the detectives took a seat on either side of me, while Parsons and the twins remained standing. Terry and Jerry wouldn't give out their last names, referring to themselves as only concerned citizens. Terry said he had retired 5 years earlier from a well drilling business after an injury. Jerry said he had recently been laid off from a local golf course. Sleuthing was their hobby. "So tell us about the tape," I said. "Chief Deputy Roger Martin knows all about it," Parsons said. "But by the time he got a warrant to search the safe at the restaurant where it was being kept, the tape was gone." "What else is going on out here?" Lewis asked, sitting up in his rocker a little. "Well," Parsons began haltingly. "Tell him," Terry prompted. "I used to work as a federal investigator," Parsons said. "I discovered this company out here that was making junk life vests that wouldn't work when they got wet. But when I turned them in, the sheriff here arrested me and threw me in jail. They tortured me so I wouldn't talk. They brought women to my jail cell and forced me to have sex with minors." I looked over to Lewis. Lewis looked at Dan. Our eyes all said the same thing. This is crazy, and the other two believe him. We let Parsons talk for a while. He outlined a wild, sweeping conspiracy. And I'm just going to interject here. Is it possible they wanted to, again, either threaten James Renner or do something to him for investigating this? When he showed up with these two other guys, they had to change their plan. Who knows? He outlined a wild, sweeping conspiracy. It involved paying a kidnapped woman's ransom with his farmhouse and being run down on the street by an FBI informant. Eventually, the ranting became too much for any of us to handle, and I stood up to leave. You know, it'd be crazy if his story was all true. Thanks for your time, I said to the men, and walked back to the town car. I waited for Lewis and Dan to say their own strained goodbyes. What was that? Dan asked, once we got back on the road, leading back toward the land of the sane. Guys, I'm sorry I wasted your time, I said. I should have sensed that man was nuts over the phone. I guess I got a little excited. Well, he had Terry and Jerry convinced, Lewis said, and it seems to make sense to him. Gotta feel sorry for the guy. Although, again, if what he was saying was the truth, that'd be really messed up. I felt awful all the same, and it would be a long time before I asked Lewis for another favor. Chapter 30, Strange Characteristics in the Firelands. Captain Roger Martin was amused by the report of my meeting with Don Parsons and the twins from New London. He'd dealt with Parsons before, though he had never heard that story. On the subject of Alvin D. Matlock, he was slightly more interested. 5 years ago, Alvin come up missing, Martin said over the phone. We still have a warrant out for him on a theft charge. Last I heard, he was maybe in West Virginia. He was a drinker, a small-town punk. I can see him trying to impress someone with a story about killing a girl. I can see him doing that. Doesn't mean he did it, though. Luckily, the phone calls kept coming. A woman named Paula Varney called me one evening as I sat down to eat supper with Julie, who thankfully still found my obsessions endearing. Shutting the door to my home office, I asked Varney to repeat what she'd just said. Margaret Mihaljevic was down here in Ashland about 2 years before Amy disappeared, the woman said, her voice a bit harsh, a familiar bluntness I'd encountered in many rural matriarchs while reporting. How do you know that? Well, it's a little complicated, but let me try to explain, she said. There's a woman here named Pat Stokes. Pat was over at the house of a woman named Joanne Stillion one day, not far from County Road 1181. While Pat was at Joanne's, Margaret Mihaljevic shows up. She's selling raffle tickets. She knew Joanne from when Joanne lived near Bay Village. But Pat thought Margaret also knew Joanne's friend Bud. Bud lived in a log cabin at the corner of County Road 1181 and Township Road 126. He was Alvin Matlock's uncle. My head spun almost painfully as I tried to digest this information. One more time, I said. Varney laid out the scenario again. You should know there was another Matlock, Doyle Matlock. Doyle Wayne Matlock is the other Matlock. He lived with Bud, and he called himself Alvin sometimes. He told everyone around here his older cousin killed Amy. Apparently, Wayne Doyle Matlock was also Doyle Wayne Matlock, who sometimes went by his cousin's name, Alvin. Wow. And in a roundabout way, according to Varney, Margaret Mihaljevic was friends with a woman who knew Bud, Alvin Matlock's uncle. So, this individual, Paula Varney, puts him in touch with other researchers. He calls them, and this is what they say, according to Renner. I spoke to Detective Spatzel about this 3 years ago. Mark said he needed a connection between Amy and Matlock, any connection. And then I read your piece in the Times Gazette. You called Amy a ragamuffin. That right there, it reminded me of a comment Al Matlock made. Quote, no one cared about that kid anyway, end quote, he said. Like she wasn't all made up like a girl, you know. A woman I knew, Mary Johnson, thought she had information for the FBI too, so then we called them together. Mark Spatzel and some other guy, Gary maybe, met us at Mary's house 3 years ago. Mary told them about this guy she met at a flea market in Marion, Ohio. Told her he had to move. So she decided she would let him come live with them. She had 2 daughters of her own. Then one day, this guy took a kitten, hung it on the top part of her bed, and then pleasured himself on the sheets. When the police went to get this guy, he had taken an overdose of drugs and liquor. So Mary wanted to tell Spatzel about this guy, and I wanted to talk about Margaret being down here in Ashland. Mark wanted to know if we knew anything about Matlock. Only more questions. All I could make of it is that Varney and others strongly believed Margaret Mihaljevic had been seen at the house of a woman connected with Matlock's uncle. I called Varney back for further clarification, such as there was. The day Joanne Stillion died, she told Pat Stokes that they'll find out it was Bud's boy that killed Amy, she said. I didn't see Margaret myself, but Pat Stokes did. I found Stokes' number in the book. An elderly woman answered the phone. I managed to explain why I was calling in a sentence or two before she cut me off. I don't think they want anyone to know about that, she snapped. I talked to the FBI, and they said not to talk about it. Are you saying you did see Margaret Mihaljevic at Joanne Stillion's house before Amy disappeared? Yeah, I seen her, Stokes said, and then she hung up. At this point, names meant little. Wayne Matlock was also Doyle Matlock, but Wayne masqueraded as his cousin for some time too. Man, this is quite a tangled web. It took a concerted effort to keep the cousins separate in my mind. It was obvious they were being confused by a number of people. Easy enough to do after 16 years, even when one wasn't pretending to be the other. In the end, it came to this. Many people in Ashland County were convinced one or both of the Matlock boys had something to do with Amy's murder, and the Matlocks were only 2 degrees of separation from the Mihaljevics. If Margaret came to Ashland, what's the possibility she brought Amy with her? Pretty good, I thought. Friends of the family say Amy was practically Margaret's shadow, especially when she was a little younger. If Margaret was in Ashland, Amy probably was too. Frustrated with the lack of breadcrumbs leading back to Alvin Matlock, I decided to try to find Wayne. On a whim, I entered his name in Google. What appeared on screen was shocking, but not exactly surprising. Wayne was in jail, charged with the murder of his girlfriend, death by stabbing. According to articles from the Lorain Morning Journal and Toledo Blade, wow. That's interesting. Wayne Matlock lived in Polk, Ohio, February 2005. His sometime girlfriend, Lori Ann Wright, lived in the nearby Nowhereburg of Greenwich. Wright was apparently leaving him for good when Doyle showed up at her apartment on February 28, 2005, and a domestic squabble ensued. Doyle stabbed Wright more than 20 times in the head, chest, right arm. He attacked her with such force the knife blade broke off in her skull. Deciding to turn himself in, Doyle specifically sought out Greenwich Chief of Police, Kevin Verberg, whom he had met around town. He was arrested and charged and ultimately struck a plea deal with prosecutors. He pled guilty in exchange for a recommendation of 20 years to life in prison. Sentencing would be delivered in a matter of weeks in the Huron County Court of Common Pleas. I immediately placed a call to Chief Verberg at the Greenwich Police Station. When we spoke with him, Doyle was very evasive about his family connections, Verberg said. I believe he has 2 sisters. Mother lives in Cleveland, I think. And he has 2 kids from another lady. From what I understand, he grew up with grandparents. I think Doyle did make a reference to the search for Amy Mihaljevic. He lived nearby where she was found. He was somebody who always wanted to be a police officer, so I think that's why he was interested. Nobody wants to leave this earth without leaving a little bit of a mark. It's strange, though, how things come around sometimes. Verberg wouldn't arrange for me to meet with Doyle personally, but agreed to take a list of questions by email that he would ask Doyle after sentencing. Sensing Verberg was a man of his word, I sent him the list of questions and waited. I also placed a call to the Huron County Sheriff's Department where a deputy spoke to me on the condition I not use his name. Doyle originally lived not far from where Amy was from, and then moved not far from where her body was found, he said. Are you saying Doyle Matlock was from Bay Village, I asked. Amherst. Indeed, it checked out. Doyle had lived in Amherst, a suburb near Bay Village. Wow, James Renner really can't get away from places named Amherst in his case. Doyle had lived in Amherst, a suburb near Bay Village, where Amy was still alive. I found his father still living in Amherst. Bud was apparently not his father or Alvin's uncle, but a relative of another sort. The father didn't want to talk about Wayne, and he hadn't seen Alvin in many years. Another point here, though, if there were other officers involved in whatever happened to Amy, if there were crooked cops involved, is it possible they would put the body close to the area where there were known criminals or troublemakers or people that maybe they couldn't convict of something that they wanted to, and they really wanted to get them on something, so they decided to dump the body there in order to implicate these other individuals? And maybe it's coincidental that Margaret Mihaljevic had been in that area? Or maybe not, because the police officers might have known Margaret as well. We'll be going down some other theories as well, but let's continue on here. In the weeks leading up to Doyle's sentencing, I made another trip out to Ashland County to visit with Paula Varney to learn more about the Matlock's connection to Margaret Mihaljevic. Varney owns a small shop that sits off State Route 224 at a crossroads that sees little traffic. Most days, her husband mans the counter selling tobacco enhancers and water pipes and black light posters while Varney watches TV in the section of the store they have converted into their home. I sat in their living room several feet behind the bongs and other merchandise and spoke to her for half an hour. 6 years ago, a guy from Bay Village came in here on his way to visit his aunt, who lives out on 126. He saw the poster of Amy and then the composite sketch of her kidnapper that I had hanging behind the cash register. He said, "Yeah, I know that guy." Varney described the man for me. He was about 5'9", dark hair under a ball cap. He had a boyish look to him. He said a cop was involved in it. Said Amy was held at the cop's house. Then he grabs his pad of paper and draws me a map. I had heard the cop rumor before, but didn't lend it much credence. All the cops in the city were accounted for that day. Most of them were in a meeting at the town hall. But I took a copy of the map and filed it away. It sat forgotten in the back of a folder for many months. And that's another thing, too, because a cop would know where all the other cops were. So if they were all out of the way in front of the police station, perhaps a cop could have done what he had done. I mean, if there was any case where you might suspect a police officer might be responsible, I mean, this one kind of fits the bill. On the morning of Doyle's sentencing, the streets of New London were empty, the false-fronted business district shadowed by winter clouds, gray as oiled snow. The Huron County Courthouse is an old building, marble and concrete, and inside it's kept suffocatingly warm. On a wall on the second floor was a sectioned mural depicting rough-hewn landscapes of surrounding towns, including Greenwich, New London, and the section of Ruggles where Amy's body turned up. It was a giant painted history of Huron County titled The Survey of the Firelands. A plaque underneath reads as followed. In the summer of 1808, Almon Ruggles started surveying at the southeast corner of the Connecticut Western Reserve, previously established by Maxfield Ludlow. The survey then continued eastward. The field books of both Ludlow and Ruggles express the difficult task that these men performed. One entry that illustrates this was found in Ludlow's notes describing the area in the Willard Marsh. Quote, "Sat a post in hell. I have traveled the woods for 7 years, but never before saw so hideous a place as this," end quote. I mean, that's really dark and ominous. I mean, what makes this random marsh in this area that dark and ominous and hideous? I mean, it's kind of weird. Amen. As I waited for the courtroom to open, a man in uniform ascended the stairs and walked towards me. He was an older gentleman with narrow eyes and a pleasant, just-my-job expression. The gold plate on his shirt read, "Verberg." "Chief," I called. "Ah, yes, nice to meet you," he said. "They just brought Matlock in. I've got your questions. Should be time afterwards for me to speak with him a bit. Is this a rare thing for your town, for Greenwich? Murders, I mean?" Been busy lately, Verberg said. Something in the water. I meant it to sound tongue-in-cheek, but he nodded seriously. I've heard that recently, he said, beginning to think maybe there's something to it. Verberg walked into the courtroom then. I followed close behind. The courtroom had a tall ceiling and white spackled walls over dark wood trim that ended 3 feet from the floor. Large glass globes hung from the ceiling like dim planets. Seated just in front of us were 3 men in orange jumpers. Not having seen a picture of Doyle before, I couldn't tell which one was him. Doyle was scheduled last, so I was forced to sit through the sentencing of a man who had raped his daughter, and of another man who had been caught with a crack pipe shortly after his release from prison. I can't imagine the spiritual strength it takes to work as a lawyer or judge or policeman. If I had to watch that sort of thing day after day, I'd start to think these people make up the majority of the population. I'd rather continue to believe such people are the exception, not the rule. Finally, it was Doyle's turn. He stood up, and for the first time I caught a good long look at one of the Matlock boys. Doyle was diminutive, probably not much more than 5 feet and a couple inches, 140 pounds dripping wet. He had curly dark hair. His lawyer told the judge that Doyle had been in jail for exactly 313 days since the crime. Doyle had turned 40 just a day before. When it was his turn to say something, Doyle mumbled, "I just want to apologize to the court and everyone who cared about Lori." From behind me came muffled sobs from Lori's family. No one was there for Doyle. The judge gave him 25 to life with a flick of the gavel, and the room emptied. Doyle was led through a separate door. I left too. I talked to Matlock for about 3 hours, Verberg said over the phone a few days later. I tried to get him to talk about Amy Mihaljevic. He said his uncle lived near the intersection where Amy was found, 1181 and 126. His cousin lives in Kentucky. It was a little bit weird. He broke down a couple times toward the end. I think that was just the realization that his life is determined for the next 25 years. I don't think he'll survive in prison. Did he say anything more about Amy? I asked. He said he heard it on a radio scanner when they found her, Verberg said. He went to his cousin's house to tell him the road would be blocked by the cops soon. He knows how cops work. 2 questions came to me then. First, why had Doyle been listening to a police scanner at 7:30 in the morning? Second, why did he want his cousin to know that the road would be blocked? Did he want his cousin to leave? Chief Verberg, however, was fresh out of answers. Alright, so that's all for now from Renner's book. I went over some of that information before, but I thought a refresher was in order, and some of it I might not have gone over. So we have the Matlocks here. We have the Bud/Butch situation. I mean, this case kind of mirrors Maura Murray's in certain ways, but let's continue here with the Calling All Scenarios post on the Blogger Tree blog spot. Amy Mihaljevic continued discussion on the Amy Mihaljevic case after 20 years. I'd like to state here first that I have turned in my summary of what this case looks like to me, in other words, my opinion. I have not heard back anything and don't expect to. It doesn't work that way. I turned it in just a day or two before the 20th anniversary. I do admit you will have to take some of it with a grain or two of salt as I did. Some things matched other things so perfect, yet so far out that I could not or would not exclude them. 1. I have reason to believe that whatever Margaret told the police to start with caused the problem in the very beginning. Was it? A. Margaret was getting divorced. B. Amy's father was a different man. Amy received a phone call. Was it from A. a complete stranger, B. a stranger driving a white van, C. someone in the family, D. someone who befriended the family? Where was Amy taken from? A. the shopping center. B. she jumped in a car driving by. C. Amy just strolled across the street onto Dover Center Road. D. walking back to get her bike at the school. Although there's other options. Some people believe that she went into the bowling alley. 2. Was Amy taken to A. the house in Bay Village across from the police station? And that'd be kind of crazy, because if she was abducted from there, and would Amy be more likely to go somewhere if the guy's saying, oh yeah, my house is just right there, right next to the police station? What would a kid think about that? I don't know. B. Kurt's house garage apartment behind the mall. C, the house Bill Hayes refers to in Westlake beside the bank. D, the house on County Road 500 in Ashland County. E, a possible cabin that James refers to in Ashland County. F, a cottage at Cinnamon Lake. G, Stagecoach Summer Music Festival Campground, Ashland County. H, the killer's personal home. Or I, the old bank barn on the same road Al Matlock's family lived on. 3, what was the reason Amy was taken? A, WPP. B, cult. C, drugs. D, mafia. E, sex crime. F, to replace a child. G, porn movie. 4, what was the reason for the blackout in the autopsy? A, did they find out that Amy had been tied up? B, was the killer a sexual deviant? C, were some of her organs missing? 5, who done it? And then there's a long list here of all the usual suspects, plus some unusual suspects. One of which is the invisible boyfriend FBI claim Margaret had. And it's kind of curious on what made them think that. Were there just simple multiple witness corroborations that she was out with some guy and it was the same guy? Also an interesting asterisk here. Let's not rule out a female. And that there is a chance that it was accidental. Wow. Huh. That's curious as well. I mean, why would they kidnap her? I mean... Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, there might not have been an intent to murder, and if it was one criminal and then he wanted other criminals got in on it later or something of that nature. So, a post here, my take, Amy knew who was calling her. He knew her well enough to gain her confidence. They agreed to meet that fateful day. Amy walked up to the black van. The person told her to go wait by the ice cream shop, because they can't be seen together. A friend of his will come by and get her. They walk to a nearby house. The black van person will meet them there. Wow, that is very curious if she quickly stopped by to talk to somebody that was unnoticed, and then she went further along, and then someone not known to her in the sketch was the one that is going to go take her to someone that is known to her. That actually solves a lot of variables. Huh. BVPD said that Burns had to have been mistaken by recalling the gold-colored car with Runkle, allegedly, and Amy in it. BVPD must have some other idea as to why Burns was mistaken. Perhaps an eyewitness saw them walking together is why they are so adamant that Burns is wrong. Amy calls her mother from the phone in the home where she is. Her captors coax her into it. Margaret comes home frantic. She goes to the BVPD, explains that someone she is close to is involved in the WPP. Everyone jumps into action. Amy is en route or in Ashland County. My guess at this point is that there are at least a minimum of 3 to 5 men involved in this. Someone wanted Amy specifically. Perhaps because of her ease of access or to hurt someone in the family. Was she tied up or drugged during this? Probably. If at this point Amy is seen in the Ashland area sitting outside by herself, she definitely knows her captor. Why is she not running? What is keeping her with him? It's someone she knows very well from Bay Village. It's odd if it was a sex crime and she was not violated. I'd say she was violated in some way, they just aren't saying. If it was sex-related, there had to have been a ring of pedophiles that regularly networked. It could have been via the internet/Usenet. I suppose that's possible. It wasn't that popular in the 80s, but there were some people on it. At some point, she struggled and fought back. They hit her on the head, and now they have to get rid of her. If it was the house on County Road 500, you're going to have a lot of commotion in a small amount of time. Someone would have noticed. Perhaps they did. Amy is found with Al Matlock's coat nearby. How close was his coat to her body? That coat is returned to him, and that's one of the most mind-shocking things of the case. Who returned Al Matlock's coat and why? Now you have a major cover-up. People die in very disturbing ways, disappear, go into hiding, stay silent. Now you have a family left with this devastation, and they remain silent. Yes, Margaret did her best. May she rest in peace. What about the rest of them? I find the lack of action incredibly odd. And regarding WPP, that's referencing a witness protection program. We haven't specifically talked about that, but there was FBI activity in Bay Village, and apparently there were various witnesses being protected for various cases in the area, and some people actually believe that because of that, something got compromised, Amy got caught up in it, and they couldn't really solve it because someone in the witness protection program was somehow compromised in that whole mix-up. Weird. Again, no idea whether that's true or not, but some people actually believe that the Mihaljevics themselves were in some kind of witness protection, which is weird. A comment here, if they were in witness protection, wouldn't they have to give up their old life? But Margaret went to Vegas to be with her mother. Even if after Amy's death they broke cover, don't you think more of their past lives would have come out? Huh. A response here, not that the Mihaljevics were in witness protection. Perhaps someone closely associated with them may have been, such as a person who was in the home but not related by blood. I'm assuming they're talking about Ruth, the babysitter who was friendly with Amy and who apparently was not known to anybody until James Renner discovered her. Rumors have also stated that Amy may have had a different father who was in the witness protection. I mean, this is getting really crazy now. But, I mean, if it's true, does that explain why the case hasn't been solved? Keep in mind, something has happened or was said by Margaret to the BVPD when she went to them with the initial report of Amy gone missing, caused them to take immediate action, unusual, and the influx of FBI agents from the start. I just thought of something. Perhaps BVPD had a report prior to Margaret coming in to the station to report Amy missing that told of seeing a young girl in the company of a man and a struggle was taking place. Or maybe seeing a young girl pulled into a vehicle. Wow. That is a curious theory. Wow. Other posts here, do you think because the FBI agent that would take the lead on the case lived in Bay Village and had children in school close to Amy's age, this could have gotten a more immediate reaction? Is it possible they did have a report of seeing a girl being taken, but they did not have an official ID on the girl until Margaret went to the police to confirm her daughter was missing? A response here, I don't believe the amount of FBI agents in the area had anything to do with them claiming jurisdiction. Something happened that made them believe she was kidnapped and taken across state lines. Or perhaps, again, if the witness protection program angle is accurate. I mean, someone responded here, the FBI was already in the area doing stings because of the girl's pervy phone calls, right? Question mark. What if they believed the kidnapping was connected to those calls? Huh. That's another curious theory. Another response, remember this is Sleepy Bay Village, all under the illusion that nothing could happen here. I highly doubt anyone called with a report of a girl being taken or the shopping center area would have been swarmed at that point. On the other hand, they did seem to go into overdrive pretty quickly, but I thought it was around 5:30 to 6:30 when Margaret went to the police. I was not of the impression she went straight from work to the police. Did she stop home first? Did she call some of Amy's friends first? I think I vaguely remember she called home first to find out Amy was not really at home. But if she did go straight to the station, what time was that? In any event, back to my point, quiet town, hysterical mother, someone under the age of 13, and maybe Amy did say something more in that call to her mother that Margaret only revealed to police. Maybe it wasn't a comm call. Maybe there was a code word, or it was a frantic call, and maybe Margaret was not allowed to reveal that. Therefore, immediate police action. Whoa, okay. That's actually, did we consider that theory? That's actually a really good theory. If she somehow hinted something in the call, but then the police told Margaret she could never reveal that publicly because if they believe somebody was with her, that could be information that only the true killer would know, and they would want to keep that under wraps. Now, I heard about this early Saturday morning when a neighbor saw the 11 p.m. Friday news and came over to tell me. I immediately went to the police station to volunteer to pass out flyers and get the word out. I guess this is a local talking here? I got a picture that the police had, made copies, and hit the road in the immediate area of the middle school. I went back in the afternoon to offer services to get a search underway and to make it public for volunteers. To which I was told they did not want anyone out searching anywhere for insurance reasons. Myself and friends struck out on our own. I went back a couple days later to suggest a vigil to bring attention to the cause. To which I was told they did not want to create such an event. Then the Amy Center was organized and all things fell to them. That's really weird. So this is a local? And they're stating initially, up to that Saturday morning, the police didn't want anything? Huh. Weird. I guess my point is there could be a deeper reason for all the police action, but it could also just have been because it was a small town and this young girl clearly didn't just walk away because it is Bay. So the police reaction I get, but the large FBI involvement, well, that just doesn't normally happen. Could Amy have said, I'm okay, but I'm on my way to Indiana, Pennsylvania, thus the FBI? Could she have been told what to say? We all assumed Margaret revealed to the public a normal kind of call, but maybe there was something more to the call. Also, if the perpetrators were staying somewhat local, would they tell her to say that she was going to another state to divert all the attention to the other states? Another response, yes, something was and still is blacked out on the autopsy report. Ashland County and surrounding areas were waiting to see what all was going to be released as to the findings. When the newspaper came out, there was a blackout placed on it, and we still don't know what it says. I'm sure James doesn't know either. I'm fairly certain that what you're stating is correct, as I have found several different things that could and would lead the everyday person on the street to believe that something was more sinister at hand. I had gone to a smoke shop to buy a pack of cigs in Medina. A friend and I had gone there to pick up a copy of James's book, which just came out. After picking up the book, we went across the street to have supper at Red Lobster. At the time, smoking a cig after eating was the thing to do and still permitted. Problem was, I was out. After getting into the smoke shop, I had mentioned the book to the cashier. She was getting ready to close, but took a brief moment to say, Mark wasn't Amy's father. I was flabbergasted to say the least. How do you know that? I asked. Because my friend was going out with a cop that worked at the BVPD at the time, and he told me. I tried everything under the sun to get her to tell me more about what she was told. She refused, stating that she probably shouldn't have said that because she didn't want to get anyone into trouble. Can anyone here see how this could fit with the other posts already? If so, refer back to James's book about what the deli owner said. I'm not saying he was correct on all counts, just a few. By the deli was, is that the guy that said he knows the guy in the photo and he was a cop and he drew the map? Another response here, there was a time lapse between Amy calling her mother, 3:15 p.m., and Margaret leaving work, 3:45 p.m. If Amy was frantic, Margaret would have called the police from work or left immediately. Margaret left work shortly after the call, went home, 4 p.m., went to the school, found Amy's bike, went to BVPD. BVPD put out a call at 5:58 p.m. of a missing child. Although, to be fair, if Amy did use some kind of code word and it took Margaret like 10-15 minutes to second guess the call or pick something up on the call, I don't think any confrontation took place in the square. If that happened, I think it could have happened with Amy walking back to get her bike or the other way. Amy walking to a house nearby. It would have been quick. Perhaps a time lapse between what someone saw and a call to the police. By the time the police would have gone to investigate it, it would have been done. Just a thought, I had posted something on Crime Rant about an attempted kidnapping from strangers, where they tried to pick up a little girl out of the blue. That was the post that caused all my other posts to disappear, so that's why I perhaps say someone saw a struggle of some kind. Another post, here's my opinion. I don't think Amy was frantic or dropping secret codes when she called Margaret. I think Mother's intuition kicked into the point where Margaret couldn't ignore it any longer, and she left work at 3:45, half an hour after Amy called. If Amy had been frantic, Margaret would have called police and left work immediately. Since I went to school with both Maddie and Julius, I've heard both of their accounts of October 27th, 1989, and they both said the same thing. They never saw the man leading Amy anywhere. As soon as they saw the man put his arm around her shoulder and whisper in her ear, they turned their attention away from Amy because they both assumed it was her dad. So that's curious. So both the known witnesses say they turned away, so they don't know if he led her away or not after that moment. I wonder a lot about Rick Burns. Why did the police not believe him or follow up? So we can go over the Burns account real quick for those who forget. Rick Burns is the mechanic who worked at the shopping plaza where Amy was abducted. His shop is right behind the plaza. There are 3 strips of stores surrounding a parking lot in the middle. Rick's auto shop is behind one of these strips, just on the other side of a small alley that empties onto the road. That's the alley where the abductor parked his car, in a spot that Burns sometimes used himself. It was a brownish gold GM and it was parked right here, Burns recalled. Burns said he assumed it was a father picking up his daughter. Now he wishes he had only remembered the license plate. This is from WKYC.com. He says it's a habit now, memorizing plates, in the event he could one day provide helpful information, but he was still helpful in 1989 with a description that was soon key to the suspect composite. It should be noted that Burns first told police he hadn't seen any suspect car when he was first interviewed in 1989. He provided the description of the GM years later, but police say he recanted it. I mean, this is all really, really suspect as well. It's still, frankly, sort of vague. Think of this, the abductor never gave reason for anyone to pay closer attention at the time. A father picking up his daughter, how close would you look? It only made the case harder for investigators. So, another article here from clevescene.com by Frank Lewis. New witness to Amy's abduction IDs Runkle. For nearly 20 years, Rick Burns waited patiently for the police to return to his auto body shop across the street from the station to show him photos of the man he saw with Amy Mihaljevic the day of her abduction. But they never came. Burns maintains that a strange man with shaggy hair parked a sedan in his personal space closest to the Bay Square Plaza on October 27, 1989. He remembers the date because it was also the day he bought his newly restored truck to the shop to show off to his buddies, and was miffed to find his spot was taken. Burns says the strange man later pulled around the shop to the pumps where he was standing. In the back seat was a young girl he believes to have been Amy Mihaljevic. The man asked Burns for directions to I-480 and then left. And I mean, I gotta jump in here because if you're kidnapping somebody, are you gonna really stop to ask directions? I mean, it's just, that's kind of weird. I mean, I suppose if he was 100% confident that Amy wouldn't make a scene, I don't know. 2 days after Amy disappeared, FBI agents came into Burns' shop and took all the receipts for the previous 2 months. They took his statement, and that was that. He never heard from them again. Last week, at the request of Channel 5's investigative reporter Dwayne Paulman, and this reporter from Scene, Burns reviewed a series of photographs of suspects and non-suspects. Without hesitation, Burns picked out former Amherst Middle School science teacher Dean Runkle as the man he saw at his shop that day. In November, Scene identified Runkle as the prime suspect in this case after speaking to sources familiar with the investigation and with Runkle himself, who now manages a Wendy's in Key West. This article is dated March 30th, 2009. Bay Village police have so far downplayed this revelation, stating that Burns' memory is not reliable. But Burns isn't the only witness to ID Runkle. A girl from Amy's school saw Amy with her abductor that day. Recently, she was shown a lineup of 30-some individuals. She, too, went right to Runkle's picture. Later, she told Scene that his picture was so familiar in appearance to the man from her nightmares that she wished the police would take a hard look at him. Following our coverage in November, the FBI did send an agent out to Florida to re-interview Runkle. But instead of sending someone intimately familiar with the case, they sent an agent from headquarters with little to no experience with the investigation. So this was posted by Frank Lewis, but apparently written by James Renner. James Renner's name is at the end of this. Okay. Wow. Okay, and is it possible that these other criminals used Runkle? Let's say there was some kind of a video ring for some kind of child exploitation ring of people, and Runkle was among them, and there was never any intention to kill her, or maybe there was, but Runkle either didn't know about it or he did know about it, and they just used him, but he was not the sole perpetrator or mastermind of this in any way. But now that we did that quick revisit, let's go back to this blog. I wonder a lot about Rick Burns. Why did the police not believe him or follow up? So another post here. So both Ashland's coroner and Balraj examined Amy's body. Why did the FBI police not trust Ashland's coroner? The part that is blackened out on the autopsy, what part of the autopsy is it? Cuyahoga County autopsies tend to follow a certain form. Another post here, a fuzzy memory about the shopping center. Today there is a spot where you can drive from the main entrance through to the back of Heinen's. The spot is between Avalone's, or whatever it is now, and the strip at the west of the center. I am positive that back when I was a kid, you could not drive through that area. There was a gap, but it wasn't wide enough for cars, or there were poles up, I don't know. I just remember you could walk through there but not drive. So if you drove back behind Heinen's where the delivery trucks unloaded, you were dead-ended and had to turn around. Sometimes people parked back there and then walked through the opening to get to the shopping center. What if Amy's killer parked behind Heinen's? Once they walked through the pathway next to Avalone's, no one would have seen them get into a vehicle. And whose house is right across the street from Heinen's? Yup, the Van Gootens. Does anyone else remember the area of the center and not being able to drive through there? I don't know when it changed, and I don't know what the setup was in '89. Also, I can't remember if you could drive through to the Shell station from behind Heinen's. A response here, it was stated that Van Gooten attended the Bay Fairview football game that night. Also, according to the Scene magazine article, Amy was instructed to meet the caller in the parking lot next to Baskin-Robbins. Next to Baskin's would be Burns Auto. Also sounds like Amy called around 3:30. How far could they have gone from the time school let out, with witnesses seeing her in the shopping center to get her to a phone? Not far. Another post here, Lake Tahoe versus Bay Village. Last night I watched the J.C. Dugard story again. I noticed similarities in both cases. 1, small quiet village. 2, people lived there to get away from the hustle and bustle of bigger towns. 3, safe place for their kids. The list goes on. Here's what caught my attention. They said they wanted everyone to help in finding J.C. They couldn't do enough things to bring attention to her case. So tell me again about this Bay Village wanting to put a lid on Amy's case. This was back 18 years ago. Something isn't right about Amy's case being kept under wraps. The response here, we think alike, 20 years, no solutions, tight-lipped, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, big egos, a string of evidence is lost, men dead after the fact in very odd ways. People that should have been interviewed immediately were not. A little girl vanished into thin air while a police officer stood not more than 25 feet away and across from the police station. Yeah, because there was the officer that was talking to another group of kids in that very shopping center, and that's something that doesn't get talked about. A small town with a high concentration of perverts, a two-county connection, but no one can find an answer to. Evidence at a murder scene returned to the owner without question. That's the Matlock jacket. Personally, I think it's time to get this case in the hands of someone else. Another response here. Between Shell and the plaza is a driveway that takes you behind the plaza to the back of the Heinens and to the ATM drive-thru, directly behind the old Shell station they tore down. Once you get behind Heinens, you can drive down behind the plaza to come out directly across from Mr. Harvey's house, or you can go around behind Heinens and come out more into their parking lot. Another response here. The police seem to think Amy called from the children's payphone at Avallone's. They had two heights of payphones. Did the police just assume this, or is there a witness that saw her there? Okay, another response here. My mom worked with Maddie's grandma, and the day after Amy went missing, my mom came home from work and told me this story. Her grandmother said Maddie told her that she saw a man approach Amy in front of Baskin-Robbins. Then a few minutes later, she saw Amy on the phone inside Avallone's, and the same man was standing next to her with his hand on her shoulder. And again, I guess it's unknown whether that's a rumor or not, because apparently nobody else saw that. Another response here. If it is true the man and Amy walked from Baskin-Robbins to Avallone's, then that was pretty bold. Not that the shopping center is huge, but that was a long walk past a lot of people and stores. If Avallone's was the last place she was seen, then it is possible the man had his car behind Avallone's and not over by the Burns garage. Another post here. It looks like Kurt may be their man in Bay. They are still looking for the man in the Ruggles area. This may be why they are now looking at Al Matlock. This could be the reason Amy's dad is not asking the public to help find the killer. They have already told him who done it, but can't prove it. So they're waiting for DNA to catch up. Another response here. I have talked directly to the men that found the jacket. The jacket was not right up next to Amy's body. It was in the ditch line in the area. I was told by a credible source that they had called Al Matlock in and questioned him, then gave him his jacket back. Another interesting post here. Good point. I'm just wondering if at the time, did Avallone's have a store camera that when checked did not show Amy and the man on that day? That's the only thing that I can see that would bring doubt to what Maddie said. That is curious, because we did talk about that, how security cameras did start to be used in the 70s, although not by in the late 70s, not by many, and then in the 80s here and there, obviously in the 90s, much more widespread. Another post here. As for Avallone's having cameras, I highly doubt that they did, and if they did, I think it would be more aimed inside the store. I believe the payphones were more in the vestibule of the store. Also, I cannot believe that a payphone in 1989 would not have a record of calls made from it. Another post here. One more question. Is it true that Amy's doctor's office was broken into, and the only thing taken was Amy's file? That's the first I've heard of that. A response here. Refer to James Renner's book, page 145, 146. This is where the salt comes in. I myself don't doubt it a bit. All right, and we're gonna go into a major mind shock. I've been saving this one, but it's time to to go down this rabbit hole. So referring here, at the end of each day, Amy would grab her bike and either head home to watch TV or follow friends to the Bay Village shopping plaza. In the back corner of the plaza was Bay Lanes. Inside the bowling alley was an arcade run by Tim Haley. Amy whiled away whole afternoons there on occasion. Also in the plaza was the sun-kissed tanning salon, where Patricia Drager worked. She was a friend of the Mihaljevics and rode horses at Holly Hill Farms. The evening of October 26, 1989, Patricia picked Amy up for a riding lesson. She gave the girl a present, a used saddle for her horse. She seemed very happy. Patricia saw Amy once more. As Amy approached the plaza the next afternoon, they waved at each other through the wide window of the salon. Amy smiled back at Patricia. Neither understood it was a wave goodbye. Okay, so Drager, who rides with her, with Amy, saw her that afternoon. Now here is the Mindshock. Who owns that tanning salon? So supposedly, it is owned by none other than the husband of the mysterious Ruth Diaz, Aunt Ruth. And we went over her on previous episodes. You can check out amymihaljevicmystery.com for James Renner's write-ups here, which is quite crazy because this is someone that does not appear in the investigation at all. And if her husband happens to own the bowling alley, if her husband happens to own the tanning salon, where Amy was basically last seen, so to speak, waving to somebody who works at the tanning salon, would she go in the tanning salon? And does Ruth and her husband have something to do with this? Or are they connected to people that do? And why have they basically been completely invisible from all media coverage? Is there really some kind of witness protection program connection with her or her husband? Also, apparently there is a payphone close to the back entrance of the tanning salon as well. We'll be getting into other angles. Also, some people might be confusing the babysitter with Jeannie Sabo. Is that Christy Sabo's mother, who was then Jeannie Silver at the time? And that might have been her husband that owned that tanning salon at that time. A lot of confusion here, but either way, someone apparently known to the Mihaljevics owned that tanning salon. Alright, so let's get to the next Mindshock. So supposedly, there is a house that's not very far from Amy's house on Linford Drive. So just across the railroad tracks, apparently there was a bank there with a parking lot that some believe Amy rode her bike there. And there is a house with some notorious drug activity going on there. Some believe it involves one or more crooked police officers. Either way, people running checks on this particular house have come up with that it was owned by the sheriff's department, supposedly. Possibly as a seizure, because if there was drug activities or whatever, the house was seized by the police. Either way, some believe that a lawyer was involved in some purchasing of this property back and forth. Again, does that match the psychic? A post here, one possibility for this property, if it was owned, it might have been a rental property. So if there was drug activity, the property could have been seized. And if it was a rental, the original owner might have been able to get it back. Another response here, if the house was a rental and illegal activities were conducted there, the court would have to prove the owner was involved in the illegal activities in order to confiscate the property. Since the owner was an attorney, he more than likely would have been disbarred. So the owner of this house was an attorney? Again, does this go back to the psychic? That's crazy. Someone asked, what did Al Matlock do for a living? A source tells the only thing they know of Al doing in that time frame is driving around and selling drugs. So is Al Matlock associated with this particular house? Post here, okay, pulled the record. The name of the owner was actually the name of the sheriff. So it looks like this house was involved with the sheriff because of a foreclosure mortgage issue and not taken due to illegal activity. The sheriff took the house May 18th, 1989, put it up for auction July 3rd, 1989. I mean, this is all getting quite down the rabbit hole of conspiracy and possible law enforcement involvement, especially if the house was being used some kind of witness protection program. If somebody was in witness protection, did they feel they could get away with illegal activity? And are there crooked cops and Matlocks involved? Another post here regarding the house and the house ownership. It could show who lived there just before Amy went missing. The conversation that Bill Hayes overheard Al Matlock talking to Sandy about sounds like Sandy also knew who Amy was. It could be the people in that house knew the man that picked up Amy. It could also be the place Amy called her mother from. It wouldn't show being long distance. Another post here, I just heard back from the author and former police officer Stacy Dittrich that I contacted about Amy's case. Talk about fate. She told me that she's currently writing a book about unsolved child murders and abductions and was starting to write Amy's chapter when my email popped up. Then she left to give a speech and was approached by Janet Seabold, the woman who found Amy's body, who asked her if she knew of the Amy Mihaljevic case. She said she started to tell Janet about James Renner's book when Janet told her that his book was full of incorrect details. And to continue the irony, Stacy Dittrich's husband was the deputy sheriff who took the 911 call from Janet Seabold when she discovered Amy's body. Okay, how high does the coincidence stack need to be? I mean, this is crazy. So Stacy Dittrich's husband was this deputy sheriff who took the 911 call from Janet Seabold, who now Stacy Dittrich is writing a book and she's talking to Janet Seabold. Wow. Other posts here regarding Bill Hayes. Back when all this stuff happened, Bill Hayes was a friend of Al Matlock's. That all changed when Al ratted on Bill and Bill went to prison. From that point on, Bill has always said he thought Al killed Amy. Bill was the one that overheard the conversation between Al and Sandy in the Westlake house. Bill was also the one in the front yard of the house when Al pointed over to the back of the Mihaljevic home and said that's where that little expletive lived. They killed. Bill has been trying to get the BVPD in Ashland County to listen to him for years, and nobody does. Bill is the one that knows the jacket was given back to Al. Lastly, Bill is the person that saw James's ad in the newspaper wanting information on the case for his book. Okay. Wow. So Al Matlock ratted on Bill. Bill went to prison. So is this simply payback, or is it both? Did he feel he no longer needed to defend his friend if his friend or his former friend who was guilty? I mean, it's really hard to line up the variables here, but at the same time, we can't say that Bill Hayes is unbiased, because if it really was Al Matlock that ratted him out, he might be looking for revenge. He might be looking to soil reputation, although, I mean, obviously, how much more can you soil that? But if Sandy corroborated some of this, if this other woman who was present here, friends of both or whoever, if she corroborated these conversations, then maybe Bill Hayes is not lying. And the plot, so, okay, here's another post here. No one knows how Margaret knew Joanne for sure. Pat Stokes met Margaret while Pat was selling raffle tickets from the school. Margaret was at Joanne's house when Pat stopped to make a sale. Joanne and her husband were close friends of the people in the log house. Bill Hayes said Al Matlock was related to the people in the log house. Paula never knew the people in the log house or the Matlocks. Paula's husband knew Bill Hayes. So what a tangled web with all these individuals. Someone posted this: Bill Hayes is not the get-even type of person. Bill is the kind of guy that will not use foul language in front of a female. He thinks before he speaks, and he always says thank you. Bill was at the house in Westlake with Al Matlock. He went there with Al to get drugs. Al was friends with Dave and Sandy, who lived in the house at the time. Wow. Okay. So apparently, so if this is true, I mean, is this shocking to anybody that Al Matlock, whose jacket happened to be found next to the site where Amy's body was found, happened to get drugs from a house mere a stone's throw from Amy Mihaljevic's house, just across the railroad tracks there? Is this not mind-shocking to anybody else? A house which may or may not have been owned by the sheriff. I mean, if this is true, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know. It's all quite mind-shocking. So here is a very, very haunting post. I don't know what to make of this. Paula, someone named Paula, I don't know if this is the Paula part of this story, but here's this post. The story of Amy. The game. Us against them. In late October '89, these men needed a child. One of the men knew of Amy. A plan was made and carried out. The plan was to take her right under everyone's nose. It was the point of the game. Step by step, they played the game. First, to make that call to Amy and set it up. Then, to make Amy take part in the game. He told her of her mother's job promotion, so he was in touch with the mother at some time or knew about her work. The game grew more intense as it played out. There was an arrangement made to pick up the child, Amy, right in front of the police chief. And it's curious, by sheriff, did they mean chief? Like, who owns that house? Because that would be kind of crazy if they're... whatever. Okay, let's continue here. So why not across the street from the police station, which just happened to be the Bay Shopping Center? It was also the day Amy's school had an officer there to speak to the children about safety. Ha ha, he said. As the game goes on, the man makes a phone call to Amy's mother and puts Amy on the phone to speak with her mom. The game is so intense by now. They could hardly get her to the place where the end would begin. There they killed her, Amy, redressed the body and kept a souvenir, took her to a freezer, and there she was kept until it was time for the game to continue. A phone call was made to a television station that Amy's body could be found in a location so odd, no one would believe it, not even the police. It would be the Sullivan area in Ashland County where the crime rate is kept low. So Amy's body was made ready for the trip. There may have been a change of plans at the last minute, for some remote reason, but still in the Ruggles-Troy Sullivan area. So be it. February 8, 1990, around 7:30 in the morning, a jogger finds the body. A call is made to the sheriff's station in Ashland, where the game goes on. The officer does not believe he's going to find a body on Township Road 1181, but when he gets there, the reality sets in. There she is, Amy Mihaljevic, right where they said she would be found. Now, who's the players? The story was written because there was too much information and not enough evidence. July 9, 2002. Written on information found in local libraries and very helpful concerned people. Okay, so this is so mind-shocking here because does that make sense? Is someone trying to play a game with the police? So the day that an officer was somebody involved with the police, somebody with connections to the police must have set this up to have known that a police officer was giving a talk about safety. An abduction that occurs right under the noses of the police, right across from the police station. It's almost like That is kind of strange. It's like they are trying to almost stick it to the police to show how dumb the police are. And how tragic and mind shocking would it be if she was literally taken to this Westlake house that is right next to her house? Is this how these crazy psychotic sick people think, that they tried to make, like, this game is literally a game to them in their sick minds, as to, oh, she's being abducted right in front of the police station, oh, let's take her to a house right next to her house. I mean, it is kind of weird why they would dump it where they dumped the body, unless there was a falling out within this group. And some allege there are connections to Margaret Mihaljevic, and she knew some of the people in that house. If that was a frequent drug house, how many other neighbors would have known of the house? How many rumors are there? Because even the babysitter, Ruth, again, let's go to James Renner's blog on this, AmyMihaljevic February 18th, 2009. He's got a write-up on Ruth here, and he actually sat down with Ruth. Here he says, I sat down with Ruth last night for about an hour to discuss what she remembers about Amy. She said Amy's mood changed the week she was abducted. Ruth cut Amy's hair that week and remembers Amy asking her to, quote, make me look pretty, end quote. She said Amy seemed very, very sad that week. Very irritable. Something was bothering her, but Ruth couldn't get her to talk about it. When Ruth first heard about Amy's abduction, she always wondered if it had something to do with the father of one of Amy's friends who also lived on Lindford. So if there haven't been enough mind shocks already, we're going more, even deeper into mind shock land, because, I mean, the coincidence stack is getting so big now. I mean, even for mind shock, it's so crazy. So we have here, of course, Ruth saying one of the fathers. Okay, is she talking about Kristen Bayless, who lived a few doors down, 9 doors down or so? We went over her in previous podcasts. One of Amy's two friends, one of the Kristen Sabo, being the other one whose mother actually helped get the word out on the TV station. And this is kind of crazy. So possibly that Kristen Sabo's husband owns the tanning salon, if they weren't talking about Ruth, the mysterious babysitter, who's saying that it could have something to do with one of her friend's fathers. So this is either Kristen Bayless, who lives on the same street, possibly Kristen Sabo. Now, do you really want to hear how far into Mindshock land we're going? Both of these men committed suicide. And it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. We went over one of them. I'm going to go over them all again because, I mean, we're going into so many conspiracies here and coincidences, and it's so hard to ignore that most females are harmed by individuals known to them. Family members, friends, acquaintances, stalkers, somebody known to them, not a random stranger. A comment here again from this Blogger Tree blog spot on Amy's case. I don't believe the caller and the abductor were the same person. It's my opinion that Amy was being watched by Matlock, and he knew the abductor, who in turn got Amy's number from the babysitting poster and called her. I also believe they were together when the abduction took place, as Amy did have to know who to look for, and the fact that she probably would have fought back when she found out she was in trouble. They couldn't be driving down the road with a screaming, kicking little girl in a car. That would have been noticeable to people on the street. It is my opinion the abductor and killer were both from the Ruggles area. One of the abductors, I feel, was only staying in the Westlake house while waiting for drug shipments, then returning to the Ruggles area where he was from. As far as I see it, that would be Al Matlock. It's also my opinion that they were connected by the sale of drugs that was at the time coming into the Westlake house. This fits with the statements made by Bill Hayes, because he was going to the house to get drugs and he had to wait for the person who lived there. This person drove a semi. Bill had gone without Al Matlock to get them. I am in no way connecting Bill Hayes at this time to Amy. It's my opinion that there was a third party involved. That is the reason that Amy was taken in the first place. The Westlake house is also where Ruth fits in. I believe she knew the guys that went to the house. She may have also had a relative going there as well. I have found no reason for her not to say anything until lately, unless she was covering for a relative. I don't have a single thing to suggest Kurt was involved. You're right in thinking he couldn't pull something off, in my opinion. Again, I've also found nothing to suggest that Dean Runkle was involved. I don't feel Al was the killer, though. A few more posts here. I was reading over in James' book about the part about the sex tape. It seems like informants of that tidbit were deluded, but it is curious that Matlock would use that really degrading term when he mentioned Amy. Do you think there could be any truth to the tape idea? Response here, a couple of responses. I personally do not believe the person that called those girls and Amy's abductor killer are the same. I guess they're referring to the other calls in the area. The person that made the calls had a different motive. He appears to be more of a shock value person. He made sexually suggestive comments and also implied to the girl he called in Bay he was outside of her house. She saw a white van, hence why everyone became frightened of a white van. If what Amy told her friends was true, then the person that called her did not make sexual comments, nor did he try to scare her. I think it's just a coincidence that these two things were going on. I mean, and that's a good point. I mean, it could be. Were going on in Bay at the same time, and that Amy's abduction scared the caller into stopping for a while. I still would like to know more about the man in Avon, because I feel this could be the same person. At this point, I don't think we have heard the real killer's names yet. Another response here. The caller was also from the Ruggles area. That's how he knew Matlock. If you look at the photos inside of the house on County Road 500, you will see the windows were covered with black plastic garage bags over clear plastic. This is indicating to me that they covered the windows to do something they were afraid outsiders might see if they looked in, even though they were way out in the middle of a field surrounded by woods. And I went over all these other properties before. It's my opinion that they did do something there they didn't want known, whether it was making a movie or something else. I wouldn't have put it past them to do so, though. I don't believe it's still around if they did make a movie, because it has been said that one of the men in it was recognized. So if that is true, they would have had to destroy it to keep from being caught. The person that came across that tidbit of information came across it by accident. And as I mentioned in previous podcasts, supposedly the FBI removed evidence from buildings in this Ruggles area, this other house where possible satanic activity occurred and killing animals and such. They removed it by helicopter, according to witnesses. But again, I went over that before. I don't know. Another response. I agree they are not the same people. It's my opinion the caller stopped calling Amy because he had her. The others stopped because they were afraid they would be charged with taking Amy just because of making random calls, and they had nothing to do with it. I agree the real killer's names has not been mentioned as of yet. Another response here. My opinion is that the person who called, I believe this, there's a few different posters. Some of them are locals. One or two of them appear to have been childhood friends with Amy herself. That's what they're stating. So this is, I think this might be one of their posts. My opinion is that the person who called Amy is the same person who killed her. I also believe that this person was known to Margaret and possibly the rest of the family. This person knew exactly what to say to Amy to gain her trust. He knew that Amy lived to please Margaret, and that Margaret was really down at that time. Knew that Amy was desperate to make Margaret happy. I think it was a sexually motivated crime that turned to murder after Amy resisted. I knew her, and I know she would have fought like crazy. Even as I type this, I feel as horrified as I did in 1989 when I heard she was taken. It's not something that I will ever forget or move on from. I think about the 3 people who knew Amy that committed suicide shortly after her death. Wonder why. They are the top suspects in my opinion. Okay, this is someone supposedly a friend of Amy's who knew her. This is her post. And again, it's kind of lining up with what Ruth the babysitter said. One of the fathers of her friends, and yet both of them committed suicide, which we are getting to. And some people are saying they're also bringing the Billy Strunak suicide into this, which we went over. So here's this post from Amy's childhood friend. Let me rephrase. Those 3 suicides are the most suspicious to be what I meant to say. Suicide just makes me suspicious altogether. I definitely don't think Mr. Sabo killed Amy, but his death is certainly mysterious. The 3rd suicide was in the Bayless family. I mean, that is kind of curious. Amy Mihajlovic's 2 best friends, fathers or stepfathers, just happened to commit suicide. I mean, what are the statistics there? I mean, 1 maybe, but I mean, I don't know. Makes me wonder what answers we'll never find out from these people. Maybe they knew something. Maybe their suicides were totally unrelated. It's just that in a case like this, with virtually no real evidence or suspects, it's impossible to eliminate anyone completely. One of my friends who saw Amy in Bay Square on the day she was taken said that he had seen Billy Strunak sitting up at Bay Square on many occasions before October 27, just sitting on a bench and watching the kids. Another one of the eyewitnesses also said in James's book that Billy Strunak looked like the guy who walked up to Amy and whispered in her ear. For those reasons, I think Billy Strunak is a very good suspect. Another response here. Someone had mentioned the suicide in the Bayless family once before, but without any detail. Can you or someone else on here share what that was about and when? No, Mr. Sabo didn't kill Amy and his death was very odd. Do you or anyone else on here have any tidbits on his death? His obituary didn't say much. I just like to keep followers informed. Wait, was there another stepfather? Wait, there's another suicide? There might actually be a couple more suicides. Okay, so this is Amy's childhood friend saying this. I heard that Kristen Bayless's stepfather, Riley Bonham, had a brother who committed suicide shortly after Amy's body was found. The police questioned Mr. Bonham in the very beginning of Amy's disappearance as well, but they never said why and if he was even a suspect. I don't really know any more about Martin Sabo's death other than what was said in the obituary. I think it's kind of odd that there are 2 suicides in the families that were so close to Amy. Maybe suicide is more common than I think, just seems suspicious to me. And again, let's compare and contrast. How many other cases where there was a child death did the child... I mean, obviously, you'd probably find a certain amount where the child's parents committed suicide, or one of them, but their best friends that just happened to be where the child might have spent a whole lot of time at their houses and with their kids, 2 commit suicide? I mean, that is... And also the circumstances of the suicide, which we went over, but we'll go over it again. So let's go to Kristen Bayless's interview with James Renner. This is Amy, My Search for a Killer, page 49. I arrived early, took a seat outside facing the door. 10 minutes later, a young woman walked in and surveyed the customers. Her eyes landed on my satchel sticking into the walkway, and she came over. She wore a business suit that still had creases from whatever rack she had taken it from the day before. Dark hair, fair complexion, thick eyebrows, turned up nose, no trace of a smile. Pretty, but plain. Bay aristocracy, that look said. She eyed me like a wounded badger. James. I stood and shook her hand. Then we both sat down. I'm coming from an interview, she said. I already have the job, but they still make you go through the interview process. Just got done. What's the job? I'm going to teach for Bay in the fall, she said. A trace of a smile played at the corner of her mouth. The day before you showed up at my house, I was talking with my sister about Amy. I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Lovely Bones. It was written by Alice Sebold. That's spelled differently than the jogger that found her body. It's about a young girl who is murdered, and she watches from heaven as they search for her killer. It's eerie how similar it all is to Amy's abduction. I jotted down the name of the book and the author. I can't imagine what type of impact her abduction had on your life, I said as a way of drawing out discussion. Kristen threw my well-rehearsed response right back at me. For the first time, I realized there were bad people out there, she said. That there were adults who could take kids. Were you close friends? Best friends. We were the best of friends. Near the end, it was really just her and I. We rode our bikes to school together every morning. In the winter, we would walk. Her mom was like a second mom to me. She had this little koala backpack. What was Amy like? What kind of things was she into at the time? She loved watching the monkeys on Nickelodeon after school, Kristen said wistfully. We had a big crush on Davy Jones. She was into old things, antiques. She had this old-fashioned bike with the big handlebars. It could have been from the 50s, blue and white. It stuck out from all the others. She didn't care if anyone made fun of her on that bike. She was into that. She was really artsy. Sometimes we would flatten pennies on the tracks behind her house. And again, they're on the train tracks very close to this other house, which possibly you might even be able to see Amy's house from the other house. The drug house, so to speak. I was a year ahead of her in school. She was in 5th, I was in 6th. 5th graders got out at 2:10. 6th graders got out at 3:10. Some of the older kids, high schoolers and 8th graders, would hang out at Baskin-Robbins after school, but we were a little too young still. Believe it or not, our parents were both very protective. We had to be back inside by the time the streetlights came on. As Kristen continued, I scribbled in my notebook. Occasionally I asked her to wait for me to catch up. Now that the gates were open, she wanted to talk. The story rushed out as she played with her cup of coffee. That Friday, the day it happened, was just like every day. Amy rode her bike to my house, she said. It was still dark in the morning. She was still talking about her school picture, the one with the ponytail. She didn't like it, and she was looking forward to picture retake day. After school, the first thing I noticed was her bike was still in the bike rack. I figured she had a doctor's appointment. When I got home, Amy's mother called, asking if I'd seen her. She called again at 8 p.m. The first thing the next morning, my mother and I went to the Mihaljevics. Margaret was hysterical. I remember walking to that house and Amy's mother hugging me. I had this feeling of deja vu. It was a memory, but it was coming back to me so clearly. Amy was telling me about someone who had called her. This had happened a couple days before she disappeared. Amy said, my mom got a promotion at work and this guy is going to pick up a present for her. He said, I'll pick you up after school and we'll go get a gift. So obviously it wasn't some random girl they wanted. Or him or her. I don't know why I say they. Anyway, I remembered it then, and that's when I told the FBI. Also, she said they wanted. Does that mean more than one person, or him or her, or is it him and her? I mean, who knows? If Kristen Bayless knows something and she doesn't realize she knows something, again, if there's just individuals connected with her family, but she doesn't know, but her subconscious knows, how would that come out in speech? I don't know. For a while, the FBI used Kristen as a quick reference, asking her to recall more specifics or fact-check their own. During the next 2 years, she was pulled out of class or interviewed by the FBI in guidance office several times. And another case, was the FBI focused on her father to some extent? Once the feds showed up at a middle school dance held at St. Raphael's Catholic Church. Do your parents have any strange male friends? How do you feel about Jason? Did you think Amy's father was weird? Kristen's stay-at-home stepfather. Whoa, okay, that is interesting. Because she spent so much time at Kristen's house. She spent a lot of time at the Kristen Bayless and Kristen Sabo's house. And here's a stay-at-home stepfather, Riley Bonham, was questioned at one time, but that didn't last long, she said. They wanted to see if anybody knew anything. They were just very intrusive. It was weird to hear them ask about my relationship with Jason and with Amy's dad. I think they wanted to know if anyone was molested. None of that was going on. Except for Sam Shepard, this was the biggest thing that ever happened to Bay. I asked her what she thought about the local police. I think they're worthless, she said. Her eyebrows crinkled with intimidating anger. Eventually, she let them rest and returned to her drink. Can you tell me a little bit more about what Amy was doing that fall? I asked. Riding horses, said Kristen. Holly Hill Farms was her second home at the time. She had a whole wall of ribbons from shows. They told her she had a promising future in riding. She was already doing small jumps and things. She would go there when she didn't have lessons just to brush the horses. It was her favorite place for sure. A few weeks before she disappeared, Amy found out her parents were getting a divorce. And it's also curious, what were the exact reasons for the divorce? Did it have something to do with an individual tied to Margaret or some other individual? And was it tied to the drug house? When she told me that, I told her my mom was pregnant. We kept each other's secrets. That's why I'm the one she told about the phone calls, I think. She was very sweet and very caring. Kristen's eyes wandered somewhere over my right shoulder. I'm not surprised Amy fell for it, she said. Also, it's curious, different friends and different people that knew Amy say different things about that. Kristen Bayless is saying she's not surprised. Her other friends are saying she would never go with someone she didn't know. So it's curious. Amy's birthday was December 11th, Kristen continued. We went out and bought her a present even though she was still missing. A board game. I gave it to her mom. Later, we bought her Christmas presents too, but after a month, we knew she was dead. How did they know that? I never saw my mom cry until she told me Amy's body was found. I didn't see her cry again until her dad died. After a month, we knew she was dead. That's curious. So that was the sentiment she's relaying. Why did she have that sentiment? I thought the man who abducted her was going to come back for me. If he knew where Amy lived, he knew where I lived. If he watched her, he watched me. My brother walked me to school after that. This was someone who knew her, someone who watched her. For some reason, he picked her out of all the other little girls at bay. He wanted her specifically. It was a planned thing. I have 2 sisters who made it past the age of 10. I was always afraid for them. That word abduct wasn't even in our vocabulary until Amy disappeared, not on that street. I asked her then about the other Kristen Sabo. No Sabos were listed in the Bay directory anymore. That was her other closest friend, she said. Christy Sabo's mother was the school secretary. Her father was weird. Used to take us all down to the lake to feed the ducks. Her father was just creepy. He committed suicide 2 months after they divorced. And I really don't want to go down this dark rabbit hole, and I'm not saying this is true in any way, but if Kristen Bayless does have suspicions about her own stepfather, would she want to divert to Sabo's father for some reason? Even if he was weird. Again, just musing here, not alleging anything is true or untrue. Back to the book here, James Renner states, I imagined correctly, it turned out, that the police and FBI would have also looked closely at Christy Sabo's father following his suicide so close to the time Amy's body turned up. I asked Kristen what she thought of the timing. She shrugged. There was a reason for killing himself in his mind. According to a report filed by a Cleveland Metro Parks ranger, Martin Sabo shot himself inside the family's van with a .357 Magnum in a parking lot off Valley Parkway on June 11, 1991. He left a suicide note that referred to financial difficulties. It seemed pretty straightforward except for one detail. The lenses had been removed from his eyeglasses. Only one lens was found on the driver's side door, the other on the floor below the passenger's seat. Yet the frames were neatly folded on the dashboard. The reporting ranger ventured no explanation. A few minutes later, I walked Kristen back to her car, but she wasn't quite done talking. It is strange that I came back, she said. All I wanted was to escape my adolescence, and here I am coming back to it. I feel like I have a connection to this town. I still talk to her all the time, Kristen said. I turned back to her. Her eyes glistened in the afternoon sun. I do. Last October, I was driving down to the BP on Crocker Bassett Road to get my coffee before work. Amy had been on my mind for days. When I got out to walk inside, this woman came out of nowhere, put her hand on me and said, "Excuse me, do you know where Holly Hill Farms is?" Kristen smiled. I just feel that Amy was saying hi back to me, you know. She touched me, she came to me. Also, Crocker Bassett Road, this is right around where that Westlake house is. Huh. Curious indeed. I mean, there's a lot that doesn't add up here, but again, we have Ruth the babysitter, stating that she thinks it has something to do with one of her friends who lived on the street, which would have been Bayless, Kristen Bayless, whose interview I just read. Now, there are even more suicides. So, of course, the Sabo suicide is a little strange, particularly if he did own that tanning salon. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Criticizing post here from the Blogger Tree blogspot. The third suicide was in the Bayless family. I heard that, so this is a response to this. Riley Bonham's brother. This is the response. I'm sure this is a fun gossip game for all of you, but these are real people with real lives you're discussing. At the very least, get your facts straight before you post something as inflammatory as that. Riley Bonham's brother committed suicide in 2001. That's 11 years after Amy's body was found. The note he left stated his reasons, and none of them had to do with this case. He lived overseas at the time of the abduction, by the way. And his name was Bonham, so lumping him in with the Bayless family is ridiculous. The majority of the Bayless family lives in Parma, and most of them never even met Amy Mihaljevic. As for Riley being questioned by the police in '89, he was. Every grown man who lived within walking distance of Amy's house was questioned. Riley was looked at pretty hard since his daughter was friends with Amy. If there was any hint of evidence pointing towards him, you'd have already heard as much about him as other suspects. James Renner is exploiting the murder of a girl he never even met to make a name for himself as a journalist. The police and FBI are only tolerating him because he is acting within his rights and not breaking any laws. They do not consider him a colleague helping them with their case. He is in fact a nuisance who's muddying up the waters and making it that much harder to solve Amy's murder. So that's a really harsh post, but and completely ignoring the fact that if not for James Renner, Amy's case would have none of the, or much less of the attention it has. Not only that, but it doesn't look like they were on their way to solving anything anyway. So bringing attention to these cases, especially if there's some kind of police corruption involved, that's really what gets them solved. So again, I don't know if that was just possibly a police officer posting that or whomever. But again, Riley Bonham's brother who committed suicide, again, obviously we don't know why. But to exclude the possibility that he might have been told something by Riley Bonham himself or somebody else. Again, I'm not saying it's connected, but we don't know. Only he knows, obviously. So, some people suspect that Martin Sabo was having an affair with Margaret Mihaljevic, and that was the reason for the divorce. And possibly one or both of them knew individuals associated with the drug house. Either way, and if there were corrupt police officers involved in drugs there as well, that would be a curiosity that would cause a lot of issues in trying to solve this case. So, again, make of it what you will. These are just the details here. Quite a lot of coincidences. It's just very difficult to try to make heads or tails out of any of them definitively. It's still curious that Ruth would kind of either out him, the Bayless stepfather, or possibly she could have been talking about Sabo and just said other people, that neighbors, street, whatever. Doesn't have to be incredibly literal, I guess. There's just so many connections here. Also, Martin Sabo's son and Christy Sabo's brother, Nick Sabo, also committed suicide in 2020. Obviously, most likely not related, but this is a lot of suicides either way. So let's go back to the game theory here. A few more posts here. A call was really made to a TV station, and this was before the body was found. Now, this is something I've gone over before. I mean, there's just strange circumstances regarding literally every aspect of this case. Perhaps that's why it's not solved. So, post here, according to this article, FBI and a television station received a tip about a month ago from an anonymous caller who described the rural area where Amy was and demanded $20,000 to provide additional information. The article did appear in the newspaper February 13th, 1990. There was some people who speculated as to the reporter's intent, claiming they thought it was made up. However, there could have been no way the reporter could have known beforehand where the body was. Renner also mentions this in his book, page 72. From the clippings and an assortment from Ashland Times-Gazette and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, I learned that the police were also interested in an employee of a Westlake manufacturing plant who left at noon the day Amy was kidnapped and did not return. Also, Amy was lying face down when found by Janet Siebold 12 feet from the side of the road. A man named Dick Stoss, an air traffic controller living in the Ashland area, claimed his daughter had almost been abducted during a walk near the same field in which Amy was found. Most bizarre was one writer's claim that WKYC reporter Tom Barris received a phone call from a man in January 1990 who said Amy could be found in Ashland County, and for $20,000 he'd provide the exact location. When I later spoke to Tom Barris, he assured me he never took such a call. Actually, I got another email from a supposed local who knew about a lot of this stuff. They said this: what if the babysitter, which is Jeannie Sabo Silver, was mad when she found out her husband was caught in Metro Parks in the middle of the day screwing around with Margaret Mihaljevic, Amy's mother? Take it further, say Jeannie was so mad that she would be the reason she would call Amy a ragamuffin. That's degrading to any mother. She even went on saying that after Margaret was dead, the woman was bitter. Now, Jeannie's husband was also known to borrow money from people. This time he borrowed from family and friends, couldn't pay it back, so there's an opportunity he has to take to get the money, so he gets Amy. She is now his property for resale. He makes arrangements for pickup and money payoff, but that never happens. He still owes money. This would be where the TV station was contacted about Amy's whereabouts. Now he was going to get the money to pay back. Also, how he knew where she was as he set it up. Just a thought. Was this some kind of in-the-family thing, and were there connections to this Westlake house with possible corrupt police officers? Did someone scheme up this plot and then it just went awry, as plots often do? But why the shutdown on the information regarding this call, unless they really believe the call was legit and they don't want any information out about it? Would they then shut all of the information down regarding this call? More posts here from the Blogger Tree blogspot. This puts a new spin on things. Why would they call the FBI TV? Were they proud of their work, or wanted to make sure when they did dump her body it would be found? This seems to be taunting of the law in the crime. Meeting across from the police station, then call the tip in of the body location. That actually does tie into the whole sinister game theory here, with a group of individuals that are playing a game against the cops. More posts here. I'm thinking that it's one of the guys in their little group that made the call. I figure it's because they needed money for drugs. If that's the case, I believe Al Matlock would be the most likely candidate. Remember what he said in the yard? They killed her, which left him out of the picture as the killer. Al was the one that needed the drugs. That's why he took Bill Hayes to that house to start with. We know, too, that Al didn't work anywhere, so he had to get money for his habit someplace. Remember, too, that he lived close to in the area where Amy was found. That's why I'm thinking it must have been Al. I could be wrong. Responses here. It definitely appears that her body was stored somewhere for a long time, or the call would have been made earlier. It would be more feasible to do that in a rural area than Bay Village. It sounds like the killer's from the New London area, but had a partner from an area close to Bay. What I can't figure out is why law enforcement hasn't picked up the most obvious suspect. He might have left his calling card. Who would be protecting him? And of course, Al Matlock is missing in action here, so I don't know if anybody knows where he is. Another post here. I believe it's law enforcement that is protecting him. Why? Because they know that one of their own, as they put it, are into the same kind of things and just may have been involved too. Some posts here regarding Ruth. Ruth is not happy with him putting her picture on the blog. There really isn't much to say about her that I know of. I don't know what kind of trouble Ruth got into from James posting her picture, but whatever it was really made her mad. With that said, I'd say she opened her mouth when she wasn't supposed to. So then, what does Ruth know? Someone from the Bay Area should know who Ruth is, what she was doing in regards to Margaret, where she worked, if she worked, where did she come from, and why. What's the deal with her? Did she have family there also? If so, who are they? Why would she tell James that she has a new family now? Another interesting post here. Here's my take. I believe that the person she befriended made the initial call, then put the stranger on the phone for Amy to talk to. After a few calls from them, he would not have been a stranger to Amy. They just wouldn't have met in person until they got together the day she went missing. That's curious. I'm sure they scoured the individuals that talked to Amy prior, and wow, that's a pretty good theory there as well. Another post here. So assuming Al is the one that dumped the body, I think it is strange that even though he did not get his 20,000 out of it, he still dumped the body basically where the caller said. Another post here. There's another reason it could have been Al that made the call. When the other guys in that group found out that Al had tried to narc them out in Amy's murder, they could have snuffed him out. So he left the area never to return again. Looks like Al to me. Wow. That's actually a really, really good theory, because maybe not even necessarily Al Matlock, but if there's a group that did this, the body's in the freezer or somewhere, one of the people thinks that the others are going to turn on him, so he tries to get them caught, so he dumps the body and leaves town himself. Is that a reason for just randomly dumping the body that day? Why not just keep it wherever it was? Another astute post here. It was close to the log cabin where Al's relatives lived that he could stand outside and watch them poke around that field for clues. It was also in the area where claims were made that cult activity was going on, and they could use it as a cover for who done it, as if to say the cult done it and not them. Okay, we're starting to make a lot of sense here, because yeah, there's this strange cult activity where they're killing animals or whatnot. Supposedly that's all verified in the area, where they're, not humans, but animals, and they're bloodletting animals, and you have this house with all this stuff. Apparently the blood was tested. I'm assuming it would have come back as human if it was human, and more would have been made of it, but who knows if the cops are in on it, I don't know. But why would the FBI cover for the cops? That doesn't make sense either. So it seems like this actually could make sense if there's a group involved here and they want to blame it on the cult activity because they know of the cult activity going on. I mean, that actually kind of makes sense. It almost ties it together. Another poster said this: do you think it was part of the game that she had to be found so they could sit back and laugh and watch the police try to solve a crime the perpetrators thought they never would? Some other posts here. If the body was found near where Al was, this gave him the perfect way to insert himself into the investigation to see what the police know. I mean, it seems kind of risky unless it wasn't Al and someone else dumped it near where Al was just so they can monitor the investigation, or a part of the game, I don't know. So another post here regarding the freezer in the house with the cult activity, allegedly. This is a post here from more researchers. The people I spoke with in that area speculated that the freezer was left in the house because it was an old freezer and heavy and hard to move. The freezer may have been left in the basement. The house was burnt to the ground a short time after the FBI helicopter that had landed and went in and took evidence out by the bagfuls, to include sections of the wall and flooring, left. It was said that the Savannah Fire Department was called to burn the house down. That house was empty since 1976. There were a few transient people living there for a short time. The local kids made it a party house because it was empty, and it sat back in the woods a quarter-mile from any road. I'm going to move on to another post here on this blog called Moving On. February 4th, 2010. Has anyone figured out who Ruth was in regard to Amy's family? What we know is Ruth was a friend of Margaret's. She played with the children. She was teaching Amy to cook. She cut Amy's hair, and she knew Amy had something bothering her the week she went missing. What we don't know: where did she come from? Why was she not mentioned until recently? Why didn't Detective Spatzel know about her? How often was she at the Mihaljevic home? Did she live there? Was she a part-time or full-time babysitter? Somewhere a comment was made that she didn't want to jeopardize the case. What did that mean? She didn't want to tell the authorities that Amy was bothered that week? Or did she know something she didn't want to disclose? If so, then who was it about and what was it? Other posts here. Regarding Ruth, if Detective Spatzel didn't know of her, that's a major red flag. The scenarios that run through my mind range from mild to wild. Mild, perhaps Ruth enjoyed the benefits of some tax-free cash, not unusual for that era. Wild, Ruth's association with the Witness Protection Program or the Ashland County area and the group associated with that area. The story regarded Mrs. Mihaljevic's sighting in that area with Amy. Was that ever verified? If so, what was the story behind that? And with Detective Spatzel, I mean, he's kind of tricky. So he might not always be telling the truth about what he knows. Maybe he did know about her. And maybe he wasn't allowed to say because it is affiliated with the Witness Protection Program or something. Other people are asking, what's the connection between Ruth and the Matlocks, if any? Some responses here. I haven't heard of any connection between Ruth and the Matlocks. Maybe someone else here knows more about that and could comment. I agree with your thoughts of mild. However, I do tend to lean in the direction of Witness Protection Program. What would be the reason for that? The claim was that someone went to Margaret's mother and asked her for address books, as I recall. She assumed it was someone from the Bay Police Department and turned them over. I never heard any more. What does that tell you? So far, no one has claimed responsibility for doing that, so I hear. The only story of Margaret being in the Ruggles area was told to me directly from the person that claims to have met her 2 years before Amy went missing. Amy was not with her at the time. Margaret was with an old friend from Hinckley, according to the person. That person signed a statement claiming it was true. That person was also questioned a few times by the FBI. When I asked Detective Spatzel who the woman was in the picture on James's site, he did sound a little upset that he hadn't seen the picture before I posted. I truly believe he didn't know a thing about Ruth. As far as Al Matlock, the last I heard about him was a few months back. Another person said they talked with a police psychic, and the psychic told them to tell the FBI that Al Matlock was living on the beach in Key West, Florida. Whether they told FBI or not, I haven't heard. I do know that this psychic did tell me things years ago that seemed to fit a few things in this case, so grain of salt or whole boxful, he may just be there. Okay, that's kind of weird. If both Al Matlock and Dean Runkle moved to Key West, what would that suggest? I don't know. That'd be another bizarre coincidence. So another post here. Okay, let me get this straight. Margaret was seen in the area where Amy was found, visiting, and knew a man named Bud who was some sort of relative of the Matlock clan. Bud lived or lives in Amherst. Are the Matlocks related to an Ashland County deputy? Al Matlock's had connections in the Bay Village area. Al Matlock made disparaging remarks about a 10-year-old little girl. Al Matlock disappears. An article of clothing, evidence found at a murder scene, was returned to Al Matlock. By whom and why? Do the FBI and or Bay Village Police read this? If so, why is this still an open case? I am outraged. Reaching, did Ruth have an association with Ashland County? Another post here. Al Matlock did disappear, but it was probably a year after the body was found. I was told the coat was returned by a deputy, no reason given. I'm sure this site is watched by BVPD as they were watching Crime Rant. It looks like they want to keep all their apples in one basket until they are certain that none of these men connect to each other. Ruth may have known of what was going on in the Mihaljevic home with different family members. For instance, She had to know that Margaret did have a drinking problem. So did she know, or was she a person that went out with her to different places to drink? If so, where? Who did she talk with, dance with? Did Ruth know all of Amy's friends? Surely the two talked about horses, school, different things. What was her reason for being in that family? Was she just a sitter? Where did she come from? Was she checked out by the family before she became so close? Where did she go for all these years? The reason for not saying something sooner, she said, was she didn't want to jeopardize the case. What exactly was she talking about? The investigation could have gone a completely different way in the beginning. Suspect? No, I don't think so. But if you look at James's site, you can compare the composite of the one person to Ruth, and they look like they could be related. As for the covering, who knows? It's been said that the small town beginners band banner, which is made only by the members, it can't be purchased in a store, which they hang on to a wall with their logo and such, could have been what covered her. Remember, it was said a coat and a blanket were found in the area. Okay, another post here. Here's where the expletive begins to get deep. From the beginning, it was rumored that a cop was involved. After all these years, checking the case out, I've come to the conclusion that the only area in which this seems to be true is with this coat. I followed this coat story to what seems like a possible connection to what happened to Amy. The entire thing sounds like something made for a TV movie on Fright Night. I will try to break it down so you can see what went on with the coat. 1. Small group of drug-using and selling men from Ashland County. 2. Snatched Amy again. Claims were made she was with them before. I mean, this is all too mind-shocking. Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. Claims made by whom? 3, they were drugged. They drugged Amy for the purpose of sex. 4, they all had a turn, maybe even made the so-called movie. 5, when they saw they had gone too far with this child, perhaps there were others, and she died. 6, they called their friend and accomplices in their group to help them get rid of the body. That was 6. 7, they are instructed on what to do with the body so no evidence of them can be found. 8, they have a plan where to keep her until a better time, where to dump the body, and who in the group needs their protection enough to do it all. 9, who in the group would take them up on this offer of protection, you say? 10, looks to me like it would be none other than Al Matlock. 11, same initials in the coat, and by golly, it's his coat to boot. 12, why would Matlock need protection, you say? 13, he raped and tortured many young girls, some he just left to die in the middle of the roads, on sides of the roads, threatening each one, should they tell, he would kill them. And I don't know how this has been verified. Is this all just rumor that this is Matlock's MO? Now, if you look at this story, what do you have? 1, cop involved. 2, sex. 3, drugs. 4, murder. 5, higher-ups. What's possible? 1, the house on County Road 500. 2, the movie. 3, some of the players. 4, the reason she died. 5, reason she was in the field. 6, who might have put her there. 7, why the coat was given back. 8, who gave it back. 9, the possible reason Al left town. 10, who knows, it's just another story. Another post here. It really is difficult to believe that Al Matlock was not arrested when his coat was found at the scene. It's unfathomable to imagine that there could have been a cover-up. It would explain a lot, though. Was he one of the suspects who submitted a DNA sample? Another post here. They have never found Al. He left the area and hasn't been seen since. I don't believe that Al had anything to do with Amy's murder because of the comment he made to that other person in the front yard of that house in Westlake. Al said they killed when talking about Amy. However, I do believe he knew about it. That may be the reason he hasn't come back. Think about what would happen to him if he did. So I guess they're alleging that if Matlock knew that whoever did this crime, if it was a group and it may have had police officers involved in the group, he would not come back. Another post here. I do agree that Amy left the shopping center on foot. It's my feeling that she met up with the person on her way back to school to get her bike. Does anyone remember the gas station on the other side of the shopping center? Not the side where Mr. Burns has a station. If so, what was the name of it? That station is no longer there. It's been gone a while. This response from possibly Amy's friend, it was a Shell station, and I definitely remember it because we always used the payphone in the parking lot. Huh, so she's stating that that was a popular phone to use. Wow, very curious. Amy's friend said it was not a booth, but a drive-up phone in the front part of the station. Remember those? You could pull your car alongside it and talk from your car. Huh. That's really interesting. Another post here, which is quite curious. Keep in mind, Margaret assumed Amy had called from home. If you are on a payphone, you'll have a lot of background noise, regardless of in a store or outside. If you're in a house, it'll be quiet. Unless, of course, she assumed that Amy had the TV on in the background and it was a little noisy. But Amy's friend responded here, yes, that's something I've thought about too. October 27th, 1989 was a gorgeous day and every kid in Bay was outside around the area of Bay Square. The phone that was outside Burns' auto would have been the most quiet, no kids around. Remember Rick Burns said he saw Amy in a car in his parking lot. That would definitely fit. Okay, so Paula is the owner of the store where the man came in and drew a map. Here's another post relating to that. I spoke with Paula. She wants to know the same thing. Paula faxed Detective Spatzel a copy of the map to the old police station a long time ago with her name and fax number. She also faxed him a copy of the map of the house in Westlake. Bill Hayes has said he had been there with Al Matlock. It is behind the Mihaljevic home. Paula and Bill Hayes are still waiting for someone to talk with them. Paula states that as far as she knows, the man could have been Mark Spatzel working undercover, as it was around the 10-year point, and that could be the reason they never questioned her. Wow. Because she did say the guy looked like Mark Spatzel, another coincidence. Wow. I mean, this is all crazy. If Ruth was only going to the home when Mark was at work, then he would not have known her. When I spoke with Detective Spatzel, he did not know of Ruth. He also called James in and requested everything he had on her after finding out he had posted Ruth's picture on his site. Ruth also told James she did not step forward before because she did not want to put the case in jeopardy. Ruth also became very upset with James because he posted her picture on his site. So what was it that she doesn't want to talk about? Another post from Amy's friend here. I did not know Ruth at all. My relationship with Amy totally revolved around our time together at Holly Hill. My opinion on drugging is that if Amy was drugged, then the police would have revealed that to the public. This has always been my take on Amy's abduction and murder. I believe that Amy was a target of a sex crime and not an intended murder victim. I think her abductor did not intend or plan to kill her, but did so after she fought back against his advances. I also believe this was the first murder for Amy's killer and that he killed again after her but changed his MO to something other than the phone call setup because he is smart and knows how to avoid being caught. I mean, this is really bizarre. Ruth contacted James. She wanted to talk. They set up an appointment to meet. Ruth gave him the info. He put it on his site and gave him a few pictures. I've followed James from his first book signing at Bay Village Library. My thoughts are someone might want to say something I haven't heard before and I don't want to miss it. I've talked with James a few different times. James was in the dark about Ruth too until she called him almost 20 years later. At first, James thought that Ruth was known until he put the picture on his site. He was only wanting to share more pictures of Amy until Detective Spatzel called him and wanted the lowdown on Ruth. James hadn't a clue. Unless, of course, Detective Spatzel knew about Ruth, didn't want any of that information public, and now he had to find out what James knew. An anonymous poster here. Am I the only one that thinks Ruth's statement, Ruth also told James she did not step forward before because she did not want to put the case in jeopardy, makes absolutely no sense? no sense. And why put the case in jeopardy now unless she thinks it's never going to get solved anyway and she doesn't care anymore? I mean, I don't know. It's weird. Here's a couple more chilling comments here. One more thing about the phone call. This is from Amy's friend. Margaret said Amy sounded nervous, like she wanted to get off the phone. Something in the sound of her voice led Margaret to believe that something was wrong. I think that Amy called her mother because the kidnapper told her to, because he knew it would buy him some time. I also think he was standing right next to her when he called. This little detail is one of the reasons I have always thought that the killer knew Margaret and the Mihaljevic family. Anonymous posted this. When Amy was first abducted, I thought I had read in the newspaper that when Margaret had questioned Amy about how the tryouts or practice went, Amy told her they were on a different day. I had always wondered if she was trying to secretly tip off her mother that something was wrong without alerting the killer. I believe that he was standing right there, too. Another strange post here. This is from James Renner's blog, February 16th, 2010. Did Bay Village chief let something slip? I didn't even catch this. Apparently, back in October, when asked about Amy's killer, Bay Village Police Chief David Wright told Channel 3 News that he believes the suspect lives in the West Shore area. West Shore is local slang for the Bay Village, Rocky River, Westlake area. Living within 5 miles of Bay Village, he told the reporter. This leads me to believe that BVPD may have someone they like for this. One explanation for not spending more time on Runkle or other suspects is that they have another suspect they like better, though Detective Spatzel has long denied this. But why else would Wright say such a thing? That statement would seem to specifically rule out several suspects in their mind. Runkle, Capella, Bound, who live outside that radius, as well as suspects that are dead, Brawler and Strunak. 3 suspects come to mind that still live close to Bay. Mr. Harvey, the math teacher, and the lawyer. I have a big problem with this line of thinking, though. You have to assume the man who committed this crime was comfortable enough to return to Bay after the murder. I don't buy that. Not with 2 eyewitnesses who could have bumped into him again on the street and identified him as the last person they saw with Amy. Honestly, I don't know what to make of this. It's a damn weird thing to say. This is what James Renner posted. Here's something that's weird, though. Well, not weird, but a possible explanation here is that the murderer is not the abductor. That's why he had no problem continuing to live in the area. He was very confident that the abductor would not betray him. Or possibly that the abductor was dead. Another post here that's a little curious. I'm really pushing this Westlake house because of the story that Bill Hayes talked about. According to Bill, while he and Al Matlock were at the house, Al had gone into the kitchen with the woman that lived there named Sandy. Bill stayed in the other room and overheard this conversation. Quote, Al, you guys are going to get in trouble for doing that to the little girl. End quote from Sandy. Al's reply, quote, nobody cared about that little expletive anyways, end quote. When I called BVPD and questioned them about the house, they said, we know all about the house. End of conversation. So what do they know? So the police has stated that they know all about the house, and if the house was owned by a sheriff, I mean, they should, but apparently they know all about these individuals and the house as well. Another interesting comment here from Amy's friend. I personally know 2 people besides Kristen Bayless that Amy told she was going shopping with a friend after school on Friday. She also said they were going to Parmatown Mall. Wow, so this is quite curious. So Amy's friend here, or Amy's alleged friend, is stating that Amy herself said she was specifically going to Parmatown Mall. And we have not even heard of this mall before in this case. We haven't gone over this. We have Euclid Square Mall, beyond Cleveland, the Westgate Mall, but we did not have this Parmatown shopping area, which is to the southeast outside of the Westlake radius. I don't know if she's referring to the shop currently known as the Shops at Parma, but it's about 16.8 miles southeast, 29 minutes from Bay Village. Very curious. Very curious. So this friend is also saying, I definitely think he used the shopping ruse on Amy. More proof that he knew Margaret, I think. I'm guessing that he knew Margaret was upset due to her divorce and that Amy would have loved to cheer her up. Amy cared very much about her mom's happiness, as most little girls do. One of the conversations I had with Amy at Holly Hill just prior to her death was about her mother and how she was mad at her. Amy was crying as we talked and brushed one of the horses. I told Amy about my mom being mad at me for trying to wear Lee press-on nails to school, and that made her laugh. I've always thought that if someone, I never saw anyone, was listening in on that conversation, they would have learned a great deal about how to lure Amy into a trap. Another post here. I get Parma Town would be getting Amy away from Bay even more. I don't believe he intended to take her there, but I mean, why be so specific? Why not just say the mall or lie and say Westgate? To tell her a mall that was not that close seems just odd to me. Something else that I just thought of, so Amy's house got a call from Euclid Mall that day. What if the assumption there were more than one man is correct, and the partner who was not in Bay at the time called Amy's house to see if she was there? Since she did not answer, that told them their plan was being set in motion. So all very, very suspect. Extremely suspect. We went over a lot of stuff that has not been gone over. These seem just way too many coincidences. And Al Matlock supposedly still missing. So he might hold the key to all of this, even if he himself didn't perpetrate the crime. He might know individuals who have. Couple more mind shocks here, since we seem to be on a roll with them. One of the researchers in the case also emailed me this. Back in August, before anything happened with Amy, her mother, Margaret, was arrested in Metro Park. So this is a couple months prior to Amy's abduction. The records were expunged. This was a time when she was drinking a lot. Theory, she was seeing a married man and got caught. A well-to-do family from Bay. Possibly the babysitter's husband. He was the one that was found shot dead in Metro Parks too, over a year after they found Amy's body. This would have been Mr. Sabo. Here's how that might have connected. A phone call was made to a TV station in Cleveland, and the caller wanted $20,000 for info on the whereabouts of Amy. He said she could be found in the Tri-County area. The station was going to set up a meeting with this person to get more info, but he hung up. The caller said that she could be found. He didn't say her body could be found, which tells me she is still alive at that time. That call came in almost a month to the day that they found her body. Death certificate of that guy states suicide. So, again, if that was that Martin Sabo that made that call? That was impossible because the placement of the gun, which he had purchased that day. Even the guy's son, who just passed recently, believed he was murdered. His daughter called me to ask about the amount of money I talked about, as her father did in fact owe $20,000 to some family friends. Do I think he figured out who took Amy? Yes, I do. I think it's because it's always been my theory that she went through the bowling alley, and what was next to that? It was the tanning salon that Mr. Sabo owned. How convenient that he wasn't there the day Amy went missing. I think they called her the day before after she got home from school and asked her to meet them the next day after school. I say this because she didn't say anything to her mom about choir practice until just before going out the door for school that morning. She had known about it even 2 days prior. She would have said something to her mom and dad, and they would have known that there weren't any tryouts on Fridays. Amy asked for permission that morning. So in this theory, Martin Sabo found out, so he's not complicit, but somehow he found out what happened. Does he have a connection to somebody? Some other interesting emails here. The curtain was made by the Amish. There are some Amish in the Ruggles area. One afternoon, while picking up a piece the Amish made, we struck up a conversation. They were very interested about the Amy Mihaljevic case. They were telling me that one of the deputy sheriffs had a snowplow business and had done their drive in the winter. They went on to say they used to be neighbors but had moved. Of all the people in the world, I was amazed to hear that it was one of the deputies that were alleged to have been involved in the Amy Mihaljevic crime. So this researcher actually showed them a photo of this curtain and asked them if this was something they made, and they said yes. They would have made something like that to use as a cover for a door going into the barn. The Amish always stop at auctions and sales of all kinds. So, regarding Spatzel, other emails from researchers cite this. My personal opinion of Spatzel is that he's an alright guy. I don't believe him or any of the FBI agents, retired or not, that live in the Bay Village area were made aware of the fact that it was an undercover, tangled up mess. Supposedly there were undercover agents in the Westlake house regarding trying to bust the drug dealers, Matlock and all of his associates, before Amy Mihaljevic was taken. So they were already caught up in the mess. After all, if anyone knew, then it wouldn't be an undercover operation. There absolutely was drugs going into that house behind the Mihaljevic home. That's the house where Al Matlock was going to get drugs. Was it a big drug cartel or operated by the mob? I have no clue, but it seems like it. And supposedly these possible deputies associated with Amy Mihaljevic were going into the house, and they all knew Matlock. And Amy Mihaljevic might have ridden her bike in the parking lot of the bank next to the house, so they could have seen her. Supposedly, one of these deputies that was currently employed was filtering the info coming in to the Bay Village Police Department, and that's why the case didn't get solved.